I'll just say a little, right. Don't have a real firm agenda, that we just have like a goal of trying to get started and see what we can accomplish with the operating plan, but I just want to state from, the city standpoint, it's been a, exciting last month and a half, I would say. And we are very much looking forward to trying to, this really hopefully being a key step, moving forward, having positive intent, positive relations, get everything back on track. Just spitballing different issues in my mind. I think we have a strategy, that we can accomplish a lot of the different points of contention. Starting with this thing, and to say that we're here to help and try to have a positive meeting, and we're all on the same page, and a lot of the same stuff that I've been saying for the last 6 months or so. But Billy and Janessa have the kind of the sample, starting point, and when Billy and I talked before, this was just something to try to accomplish what I believe John Siebold did, earlier on the South Park did, working on something. So when you get a group of people together, you're not creating soup from scratch, and you're actually able to move forward. This is a completely flexible or fluid document. Just our first intent on it. If it's something that grow up, we can do that too. So we just wanted to get something down during points to go over and try to have, I guess, a lofty goal, I don't know if it's possible or not, would be that we have boilerplate language that is consistent with all 4 bids.
It's the last
But
one.
then each bid is able to.
Are you looking for this?
The CAN language and custom.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, Billy, if you had an idea how you wanna just start reading, going through this and talking about the sections?
Yeah, we absolutely can. Dave and I had talked about doing a general, starting that kind of covered all bids. This is written for each individual bid. So we can either go through and cover the things that are specific to all bids and then go to the bid meetings and fill in the individual things, or we could just start working through it and then take it to bid meetings and get input there. So, whatever you guys, we have a couple hours, few hours to work on it. So, whatever you guys think's best. Have you had a chance to read through it?
Yeah, could you,
Just so this sample one, that this is from the city of Madison. Based off of that.
But I think they looked at yours, and maybe Milwaukee. They looked at some other ones too, including yours.
Yeah, they do. I mean, there will be some, obviously there's a lot of boilerplate kind of stuff that are, including like the definition of this and that kind of thing. But for sure, they'll have to modify it for each of the individual, right? Yep. Each
Yeah.
of it and their work plans and their, purpose and that. Yep.
is that just section 3 that would be kind of bid specific?
Yeah, some of that's gonna be, for all of them, like what the plan objective, some of that might change, but, to encourage and promote the development, redevelopment, and vitality. When you get to B, the proposed activities, those would be specific to each bid. So there's stuff throughout here that's going to probably be the same for all bids. And I think that's a goal that we heard from many people is, getting everything more consistent across the bids where it can be. So that's where we wanted to start with doing this meeting to kind of get everything that we can that's similar or close to the same, kind of discussed and gone through. And then the stuff that's specific to the bids, we'll discuss with the individual bids. We just want to start an introduction and start going through it. I was going to put it up on the screen. Sorry, I don't have another. Usually we have an adapter down here where I can plug two USBs in, but I couldn't find it. So if we need more copies, I can get some printed out. Yeah, it wasn't up here, but yeah, I think everybody has a copy. Yeah, that one didn't have like so the introduction, it states what a business improvement district is, per the state statute, and we will add that as Appendix A, when we start putting these together for each bid. But it's a specially designated geographic area that authorizes the city of Eau Claire to levy special assessments on commercial properties located within the bid for the purpose of funding the promotion, operation, development, and maintenance of the bid area in accordance with an annually updated operating plan and the city's comprehensive plan. Bids are a useful tool to enable business communities and the public to coordinate the orderly promotion and development of our city's vibrant business districts. And I'll stop after each paragraph, see if anybody has any questions or edits or anything, so we can kind of address things as they're fresh. Any thoughts on that one, or keep going?
The language that we have in our plan for that introduction.
Okay. Under Wisconsin statute, and it lists out the statute, cities are authorized to create a bid upon the petition of at least one owner of property used for commercial purposes within the proposed bid area. City Council has so far approved the creation of 4 bids, including South Barstow, West Grand, Water Street, and North Barstow Medical. I think that one's pretty simple. Any? All right. This is an annual operating plan for whichever bid it'll be, hereinafter referred to as the district for, and then we'll update it for each year calendar, which has been prepared to conform with the requirements of the state statute. So anything in that introduction portion that we think should change, or we want some different language?
Currently just wants to bring up the point now that we have currently for North Barstow bid, a 3-page operating plan and a 4-page bylaws. So then combining them into one document, I call it so far an 11-page plus amendment. So maybe, 20-some page. So while I don't disagree with anything that is in the introduction, I still have it in my mind, just like a concern that when new board members are introduced or, welcomed onto a board and they're expected to understand our operating plan, like how can we make it as digestible as possible? So like, I don't think that anything is wrong within the introduction. Could it be shortened or made more brief just so that it is realistic, going forward throughout the years for people to join the board, understand the charge and feel confident moving forward?
So something that might be considered with the Housing Opportunities Commission, their new members came on in April. So every May, the time that I was staff support, we would go through all their paperwork and not read it verbatim, but just kind of explain it to everybody to help with that, and then see if people have questions. So that that could be something, and I would recommend that we do that anyhow. Because even if it was 3 pages, there's gonna be some people who may not read it at all. So that way, and questions can be answered, because Janessa might have a question that I wouldn't think about and be like, oh, well, that's a great question. That's good to know. So, I would recommend doing that at one of your meetings, just a brief overview. We can look at shorting it. Would have to let legal do their magic on that.
It might be something, in our budget books. So their budget books, it show your budget there, and it describes, there's a little narrative. It describes what you want to accomplish, and then it describes the financial portion, typically 1 page, and then it doesn't get into all of the legal stuff. It's just kind of a 1-page summary that you pass out, and that might be something that, that would suffice, that we could pass out to new members to say, here's now, aside from all the legalities and this and that, this is what we're doing. We're taking care of it. Yeah, outside lighting, more electrical, all that's, planning festivals or whatnot. And here's how we special assess ourselves for it. I think there's a narrative on your special assessment, in the budget book. And so that might be, and then because the budget is also your opportunity to kind of market yourself and brand yourselves and tell your story.
Yeah.
And that would be good back information for your members that may not have the history, of your bids.
Yeah, I guess my point is to make it accessible. One of my goals is to make the operating plan as easy to understand as possible. The new version compared to, what we have in place right now, which is 20 years old, is like 3 pages layman's terms, 20-some pages, and it reads like a legal document. And I would like to just, what I will be happy with presenting to my work will be something that, is easy to understand, so people are confident in what they're agreeing to.
So create like a summary document.
I don't how we have it in West Grant. It's in, like, it's more in layman's terms. It has a paragraph on the sentence, but it's easy to understand. And so this was written by a lawyer.
And there's always going to be that legal statement that what you presented, meets, the legal, so why does the whole document have to read like a legal document? Does that make sense?
That's why I don't want to change my our for West Grant, because that's all the.
Yeah, looking at the rest of it, it does have some statutes noted in there to explain some of the stuff, but some pieces I think go more towards the legal part, but some of it is general.
If the bid is responsible for annually reviewing and updating their operating plan, shouldn't it be something that the bid can easily understand, review, and update? Like, I love the summary, but I'm looking to have an operating plan that doesn't require a summary. Because otherwise I don't feel like I could ever actually be responsible for reviewing and updating it.
And you feel that your current form is arduous with your bylaws and your.
No, our current form is really, simple. Easy to read and understand.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to have as much of the full context as we can written down in at least some place to situate the authority relative to all the different enabling factors at the city level or the state level. Part of what I hear you saying, Julia, is that it feels like if you're giving this to somebody, hey, update it. Most of this, once we get to a version that presumably the bids would adopt, is stuff that we would touch on an annual basis. Would it be more clear? I guess I'm asking you, do you think if the operating plan section, that kind of section 3, was rather than in the middle of the document, it was the addendum? This is a governing, this document, the framework remains a given. Each board shall annually update Appendix A, or however it would be numbered, reflecting their, I guess that's also called an operating plan, and the terminology of that in handbook and guidebook and what have you, I know has been difficult, but I think much of this, once it's agreed to, is going to be kind of timeless. So putting the part that changes annually in with the timeless stuff, I could see how that could make it harder for some to get it. I think relative to what we currently have, which is, different points in time and multiple different documents, I don't think it's bad to co-locate this stuff.
That's all that I can do, appendix. Upon operation, some things are just, your assessment, I mean. Some of that, if there's something that's just by law and not changeable, then that's really not the piece that it should really, or even really look at the operating plan piece of it that city council members need to look at. The board is as adjusted with our, I mean, really, it's the kind of work plan that changes, right? The statutes don't change.
Yeah.
And
So,
that's really of a second doesn't change. Right.
So if we pull out 3 with the exception of D, because that'll be the organization of the board, which will probably remain consistent. I mean, it can be edited if you decide in the future, but we pull out most of 3 and put that as an appendix. Then it's just those pages that, for the most part, looks like will be updated, yearly if needed.
Yeah.
But put that first and then the other stuff as an appendix.
Or I mean, it's something that just doesn't change, right?
Okay.
I mean, that's a long way of explaining what your method of assessment is, which is fine, but I mean, it's a lot. A lot, you just have 2 sentences.
Yeah, when I pulled a lot of them, they have, a lot of this stuff as appendix, but not written out, as nicely as this. It's a lot of the actual law in there, which I think is a little more difficult to read. And maybe a little more unclear, but we can absolutely do that. Make 3 with the exception of D, the first part of it, and then the rest, and put the rest of it after it.
Julia, with yours here, that appendix, then you would want it to read like your 10 goals, or the goal to be updated. So it's just a simple list, and then you would just, the bid would look at that, so that's now on the appendix. But it would be kind of written like yours, this one. Usually very easy to look at and stuff and review every year. They're just, very simple little statements.
I guess it seems that, and I really appreciate the work to have pulled all this together, including the appendices, because it's co-locating all that information is going to be really helpful. I guess what part of it is the operating plan? Are appendices on a signed plan? Would that still meet the purpose of, okay, the bid is agreeing to all these rules without giving the impression that those are something that can change when it's opened up every year?
And so the operating plan is that whole document. I understand that there might be a lot of it that doesn't change and that's perfectly fine. But for statute, the operating plan includes the special assessment method and includes whether real property used for manufacturing is assessed, the kind, number, and location of expenditures. So it has to include all those things.
Yeah.
How it's organized doesn't matter.
Okay.
So each bid can make that decision. That's perfectly fine.
And I think there's been conversation about, and terminology, whether it's handbook or a policy guide, procedure guide. All this framing seems relevant for that too. Is it conceivable that, well, this isn't making it any shorter, but if it becomes, here's, the bid Bible, so to speak, that starts with each bid's sort of scope of work for the year, specific priorities, and all the accompanying information that contextualizes what a bid is, kind of at that highest state statute, city policy framing level, everything in the operating plan, and then a procedure guide as an appendix.
When we do the procedure guide, I think it might be separate. We can add it to
They may not
this.
have the same force of agreement, or
Yeah,
doesn't need to be contained in it.
Right.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be adopted as part of the operating plan necessarily.
right. And I
guess-
think separate, because it could change a lot. And I think the operating plan's more if the bid decides to make a change. If there's a law that changed and we need to change the way we,
Mhm.
do procurement or
Right.
something, that's gonna be more a memo and updating that so that when new members come on, they get these policies, this how-to guide, and they can see what they need to do.
I guess, so maybe my comments are more toward the overall scope of what's being created beyond just the operating plans. But if we have all those components, that will be everything we need, right? And I don't know if it's as simple as a page break or, again, some reorganization to indicate that when the bid is asked to review it for the next year, they're not, well, we don't think this policy or this law applies this way, right? That's not what that stuff is for.
So we could name where it says operating plan, like name that goals.
Yeah.
Goals and budget or goals and funding, maybe, something like that. And then,
And I guess the introduction to me reads like a legal justification for the bid. Like, is that required for the introduction or does that come later? Like, I
yeah, we,
would like to simplify as much as possible, just so that, like, this isn't such a large, complicated document that we don't feel, like, capable of updating it in the future, because I have 9 years of experience as chair, and I still read this going like, okay, because I've, tried to understand the state statutes for the last 2 years, like, I can get there. I would like to be replaced, and I would like a new bid chair to feel like they can look at this and understand what they're agreeing to, or, what needs to be updated. And I just, like, as much as we could simplify, I think that this is like a very robust operating plan. It doesn't have to be as lengthy and complicated. I read it as it is complicated. Can we simplify it so that it is easier to work with in the future?
yeah, we,
I
Yeah.
I say yes. I think you can have an appendix. You can have the world's biggest appendix.
yeah, and that's,
All
we,
the statutes and all, you know what I mean, all the things, right, for the purposes. Like in an operating plan, it's really not even, once you have an operating plan in place, there isn't actually the requirement to update it every year.
I mean, could the introduction, if it's just an introduction that, bids exist because of this state statute, Eau Claire has 4 of them, this is the operating plan for this district. Like, is any of the other stuff required? in the introduction. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to dumb it down to like
Nope.
a place
I
that.
just noted too wordy, so we can look at how we,
I think it goes in, I think this boilerplate stuff goes in, you know, and just get to the point of the, in the front piece of that, because that's the piece you want to understand, and so.
so some of these things that are already in the appendix, maybe we just move those information there as it like district boundaries. We just put that on the map in the
Section on
appendix.
boundaries.
Yeah.
There's an entire section on
Um,
it tied to the plan, you know, the orderly development of the city. So like.
So,
Restate. So many things.
yeah, so we take number 3, where it says operating plan, call that like goals and funding or goals and budget. We take that through C and we make that the first part of it, where that just talks about what the plan objectives are. And then kind of explain, because that's what you would be changing if you chose to change stuff. And these are just some examples, that are in here. So plan objectives, proposed activities, and you guys will update those like with stuff that's either in your current plan or what you want to do going forward. So just those pages would be what you work on every year if changes are needed, and then we can make the rest of it parts of the appendix, so it's still part of the operating plan as needed, and we can work on the wordiness of it too.
Well,
And if it's not needed, why put it in an appendix? Is my
Yep.
point.
Yep. Yeah.
I hear you. I'm a little hesitant just because I think a lot of work has been done just to flesh out everyone's understandings of the context. So I'd hate to lose that good work. But as you said, Billy, I think resituating it with the renewable piece or the changeable piece up front, I think it's still a fairly helpful framing. But in terms of how does someone take this and know what to do with it? I can see how it feels like, oh, I kind of have to read every part of the whole thing to get if I understand any part of it. And of course, whatever the plan, the annual goal is, that's going to align with everything else that is in it. So I don't feel bad about moving those pieces around, reorganizing a bit, but as opposed to introduction, this may be more history of bids or, you know, bids in Eau Claire as a framing statement, which I think is still useful.
Do you guys like that for the introduction, like the history of the bids? And then it goes into what each bid's objectives are and plans, or
I think I liked what Julian, you had said before, which is that it kind of goes directly into here's the annual operating plan for this business improvement district. When this current introduction is relocated to a different portion, since it won't be the first thing, if it's not the introduction, maybe it's history or context of bids, which
Okay.
then describes
Yep.
the rest of the framing information that's
Gotcha.
provided. But that isn't what you would expect a bid member to make sense of.
For example, under plan objectives in our current one, it says to assure continuing successful downtown development and promotion effort, this bid has developed a set of goals. And then it basically just, well, and then there is a couple more sentences, but like this one, I feel like it states goals in it, and then it lists goals, and it just, I mean, they're actually pretty similar. I feel like if I could just rewrite it in my maybe layman terms and try to make it more brief, and like we just got this yesterday around noon, so we've had 24 hours and, you know, there's other stuff going on too. So like I have notes on stuff and we can move on. I just, I guess overall, one of my goals will be to really make it as short as possible without taking out anything that needs to be there so that people can actually be responsible for everything that it says. And if it's restating something 4 times, I think that the the stuff of substance gets diluted to a point of like, you're not actually going to understand and care about the most important parts, because it's hard to find.
You don't want to bury the lead or, well, I thought it was this rule. Well, that's a summary sentence that refers to this paragraph more fully, that kind of
Thank you.
duplication or summary.
Yeah,
I
feel like
I do think it's well organized and good work has been
Yeah.
done, but I'm hearing this sort of user experience sort of,
Yep, we can absolutely work on that, and we can, look at some of the things you guys have for your goals and where they're consistent and, take from what you guys have here to update. I think this was mostly taken from other ones, so this isn't set in
Yeah.
stone. We came expecting a bunch of redlining and to change it how you guys saw fit. So we can look at those and change them as desired.
So then, given more time, would each bid kind of like stay with the general organization, but rewrite it? I know there was effort to have as much sameness between the bids. I don't know.
I don't think it has to, I mean, it was just something that I talked about to keep it easy, if we had that in basic, but I mean, each bid plan is different currently, so I mean, if they're not going that different, then you have, it's easily identified, like, some bids, like South Barstow possibly, since they're the first one in the state, may want to have more of a history, like in the introduction, or the smallest one in the state. Doesn't sound like that's important for you, or what I'm interpreting, what you're trying to say is, you would like your operating plan to pretty much have the goals and the special assessment method, the description of that in the plan, and then the district, the boundary and everything else, there are appendices for that, so it's, yours is more bare bone, but I don't know if it's important to West Grand bid to have that history to say that we are the smallest bid in the state.
I mean, we don't say it. But we do it, I mean, we do like, we do the introduction, because originally, I mean, we wrote an operating plan from the get-go, when we started in 1987, and so we've always had an operating plan with goals and that kind of thing, and ours is like that long, plus appendices, like, who's in it, that kind, those kind of things, and so it's written in a way that is helpful, so, it gives all the things, including all the state statutes in that sort of thing, but it's just in a way that easily understood. Some of that won't change, like the update our goals, but I mean, there isn't a tremendous amount that would change in our operating plan. The last time we put on was 2017 adopted then, formally January 18, so. To look at it again, but some of this won't change. Some of what would change is maybe obviously the dollar assessment, and maybe specifically your budget items for specific projects or that kind of thing. But the basic goal that bids do on a daily basis really does, really, the main goals don't really change from year to year much.
And do you have separate bylaws that,
Yeah.
you don't have separate bylaws?
We don't have separate. And so, you kind of govern the board and the goals and assessments and that kind of. So,
A lot of our bylaw details have been incorporated into this document, but the kind of, rules have changed. So also, like, I don't know if that's because our bylaws were different from somebody else's or a city staff individual. I don't, did you write this?
No, the other attorney in our office did actually, so
So I don't know.
I've read through it, but
They added, certain things because that was their recommendation.
and I'm not sure, we can go through, I don't know what the differences are between, the draft and your bylaws, and we can certainly look at that. I don't know if we want to work our way through it or jump to it
Yeah.
or whatever.
No,
Well,
And-
it sounds like we're identifying the sort of front matter that's gonna be really specified to each
Yep.
bid and that we would encourage or expect bid members to engage with on an annual basis. I was going to say that the rest of it is really structural framing for, okay, you are a car manufactured in Detroit, but are you a Ford Focus or a Mercury Sable or what's the specific stamp on it, right? Or VW, Audi, whatever. And that would be the context that's incorporated with each annual update. But perhaps the bylaw sort of replacement section is worth taking a closer look at just to understand what did or didn't change. I didn't find it objectionable, and I think based on our understanding now of how the bids are situated, that's preferable to separate bylaws requiring separate action items in business to make updates. So I would expect most of the rest of it to apply, as Dave was saying, fairly uniformly to the rest of the bids. What that front matter looks like and is organized, if there's I don't know that there's a mission statement per se or anything in current bylaws that, okay, these are all the same, they update their operating plans, but West Grand really wants, or South Parsons really wants this reference at the top based on language from a document that's going away. So I think it makes sense to keep kind of looking at each section and thinking, is this front matter? Does it apply to all? And do we understand how we got from what we have, what we had or have currently to what's in this draft? And if we understand those things, hopefully I'm hoping it won't be too much to reorganize this and have another draft that's fairly, quickly ready to go back to bids for their specifications.
Yeah, I agree. Instead of going to each one and writing one, if we can get through the stuff that's gonna be pretty much the same for everyone, and then we just go into the operating plans and like the plan objectives, you guys already have your goals and stuff here. We just feed those into what these plan objectives are, if you guys want to change them or anything. And then the proposed activities, we go to what you're proposed, and we just add those in. So we'll put that part up to the beginning. But I think a lot of this stuff will be similar. Board size, that's going to be a little different for each one. West Grand, it's, whoever's in the district. So those are minor ones, but the overall for the boards will probably remain the same. But we can skip the operating plan through D and work on those with each bid, and we'll move that up front and start and move to section 3D as more of a general bid, even though there'll be some differences.
I feel like I understand all the words, but under 3 operating plan, A plan objectives, number 4. What is it saying by promote and encourage development of entertainment, cultural and civic activities and facilities? Because I feel like we're already saying that we're promoting development that encourages activity in those areas. So
Yeah.
if I don't understand it, I can't actually
Yeah.
work towards it.
So for that section, instead of that 1 through 5, we'll take what you guys have in here. That'll be your verbiage. These are just some examples, placeholders. It doesn't necessarily have to be that language. That's
from that's from my operating. I don't know.
Oh,
And I guess, what was the update that, because that probably predates Lismore and Pablo and civic facility development gathering spaces
Yep.
at a different point in time.
and we can work on those parts with we could work on those with the bid, those parts of it with the individual bids. So, being that is part of your operating plan, we could work on updating those while we're doing this.
to me, that for means, like that specifically, that's deliberate language, your expansion of, I think it's the bid is paying for more electrical outlets, through the park, and I think, did you guys hear, and I get North Barstow and Decky, the lighting, for around Christmas? Did you like some of the trees in the park?
I think,
We used
That's
to
Decky.
support Decky's
Yeah.
installation of Let It Glow, but not anymore. But yeah, we do electrical outlets, so that would be facilities.
So I think when you do stuff like that in the kiosk where people can get information, I think that's
Yeah,
helping
sculpture tour,
encourage,
yeah.
encourage cultural and civic activities in your district. I think that helps facilitate. But I think,
yeah,
I think you guys are doing that.
Yeah.
It's just not spelled out electrical.
But I see how it can kind of read like the bid shall go out and solicit massive investments of, and that, I agree, that doesn't feel like what the bid is able to do.
Our sense is to provide and encourage development in the district.
And maybe it's some of the stuff we've talked about, like, a city decky bid collaboration on Half Moon Lake, you know? It would be something probably bigger than you guys would want to take on alone, but if we work on something together,
A collaborative kind
yeah,
of.
yeah, it could fit into that. But yeah, we'll work on, that section with each of the bids. So if we go to D, the organization of the district board.
I think we should start at C, expenditures and financing method.
Okay. Okay,
Oh, I had a question or two.
all right. C, the first paragraph, the 2025 operating budget for the district of approximately however much as set forth in Appendix D, attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. It is proposed to raise the budget amount through bid assessments. The projected expenditures are also identified in Appendix D. The actual budget will be adjusted if the actual revenue received and expenditures are more or less than projected. The adjustments could include revising or eliminating individual budget line items as determined by the district's board.
So I would say that, in North Barstow, we set an amount that we're going to raise, we set an amount that we're going to, pull from reserves. And then we have a budgeted amount that we're going to spend. And that's only been for the last 3 years. So, you know, in like 5 years ago, we did budget the amount that we, you know, assessed. But so I just kind of said, not always, like, if it's not
Yeah.
written that we can do that, then I feel like it's saying that we can't pull from reserves.
I think that's a good point.
So add something like the adjustments could include revising or eliminating individual or pulling money from Jennifer gave us another word for it yesterday. Cash something, but from reserves.
The bid board will determine the amount that is going to be raised through assessment. Amount spent from reserves, which could be 0. And then, you know, those 2 items shall equal the budgeted amount.
So, yeah, second sentence, it is
So-
proposed to raise the budget amount through bid assessments and, if applicable, authorized use of district reserves or something.
You also, you can use reserves even if it isn't in your budget.
It seems like only one person was invited from the bid, so I wanted to make sure. You also have to recognize that we might credit this, so it can't just be
Yeah.
that we might pull from reserve, debit or credit from reserve as a balance, depending on what happens.
I know, I would say that this, first 2 paragraphs make it sound like very set in stone of like the, like, you know, if the actual revenue received isn't what we projected, then we're going to cut from our budget. I've never run into that process, like this just spells out, scenarios that I feel like I've never experienced in the 11 years on the bid. So again, is this a new reality or is this, because have you ever said that you're going to collect 100,000 and then that the amount is different and then you have to go back to your budget and cut?
No, so one, if we didn't spend it all, then the difference went into reserves.
And that's
Or the other direction, we needed to, for a project or whatever within that year, pull from reserves, then we voted to pull, or voted to pull from reserve for X, Y, Z. Yeah.
Yeah, so we can update this. I think the language talks about how a lot of bids, they set their rate and then their rate determines how much. You guys do it differently. You set the amount and then you're like, we want 100,000. You figure out what rate it takes to get us to that 100,000. So I think we can look at the language in that way. And so that's probably why it was written there. And we can add some verbiage that allows to pull from reserves. And I think it talks about the money at the end of the year would be carried over. So going back into reserves. Does that sound good? Okay. All right, skipping down to the next, the third paragraph. The district's board is empowered to implement the operating plan subject to the city's mandatory purchasing bid, RFP, and procurement requirements found in city ordinance, as regulated by state law, including but not limited to the state laws, and written guidance created by the city's finance department. This requires the board to, among other things, negotiate with providers of services and materials to carry out the operating plan, to enter into various contracts to monitor the effectiveness of the district's activities, to aid in compliance with the provisions of the applicable statutes and regulations, and to make reimbursements for any overpayments of district assessments. All contracts shall be reviewed by city staff pursuant to city contract review policy prior to being signed by or otherwise made effective by the board. Further, the board may only act within budgetary authority and is hereby not permitted to borrow funds, may not contract for amounts in excess of the authorized budget, and may only contract for up to a 1-year term not to extend beyond the expiration date of this operating agreement or the authorized budget period.
Okay, so
So-
when you're talking about the contracts, what are they talking about?
So
What
the
is this referencing?
Yeah, so the different agreements, like North Barstow's working on going into agreement with DECI for them to manage all of their budget stuff. South Barstow has an RFP out and there'll be a contract done for their landscape maintenance downtown.
So these are only the RFPs? I mean, that's a.
Nope, it can be bids also. So South Barstow also has an agreement with the people who do their lights, but that didn't require an RFP, just bids. So within the procurement policy, like under 5,000 is verbal, 5 to 30 is written, and over 30 is an RFP.
Okay, so, but it says all contracts. So I'm still not understanding what you consider, what's a contract mean? Let's say a dispersed, what is just an outlay of,
So
Money.
if you didn't have, DECI, say you had 5 things that the West Grand, accomplishes each year, and you didn't contract with DECI and the board wanted to manage that, you would have 5 contracts. 1 for garbage, snow, trees, lights, and that, so you would have 5 contracts. If you do a contract with DECI, then for the 5 services that are in your operating plan, then you would only have 1 contract with DECI, and DECI would be providing those services that you contracted with them that's in the RFP. So you wouldn't be monitoring DECI's contract with Earthbound, you would just be monitoring your bid contract with DECI.
And I have another suggestion, or, how I would like our operating plan written, is that the bids have the right to contract, and in the state statute, it says under, I don't know, C2, if the cash balance of the segregated account described under sub 4 was less than $300,000 at all times during the period covered by the report, the municipality shall obtain a reviewed financial statement for the most recently completed fiscal year. So I've been told, that would give, if that is the rule and the bid has the right to contract, then the bid could manage their own contracts and provide the reviewed financials for that fiscal year. And therefore, we wouldn't be subject to the same like rules as the city who requires the audited financials.
Oh,
So I think the right to contracts, it's gonna give you guys the ability to sign, and I'll let Janessa answer. I feel like it says this in here where it says being signed or otherwise made effective by the board. Does that give them the right to sign it?
Yeah, this
But
is-
it's still gonna have to follow the procurement and legal review. It just gives you guys the opportunity to sign it versus city staff, is my understanding.
But if you're saying it still has to go through reviewed by city staff pursuant to city contract review policy, why would our contracts need to be reviewed by city staff and pursuant to city contract review policy?
It's still public dollars, it's still the assessment dollars, so it still has to follow all city procurement. You might not, if you fall under that 300, like you're saying, you might not be subject to a full out audit, but we still have to follow the same procurement policy regardless of the audit standards.
But aren't the procurement policies designed around the necessity to be audited?
These funds are audited with all of the city's funds. That's where all this procurement stuff, part of where, there was a bunch of things that got, when they were reviewing it, not just with the bids, but the bids were part of, it, that the procurement process wasn't being followed. So, it's audited all as one.
Anytime over zero has to get approval by finance before they can spend it.
Depends on what it is. If I want to have a team meeting and buy donuts, I don't have to go get 3 bids for the donuts and get approval. If I want to have contractual work done on the building, then I would have to get bids from 3 different so yeah, all staff and stuff has to do this, and it wasn't a change just for the bids. It's citywide.
What's the line? I mean, there's a big difference between donuts and a remodel. So where do we learn?
so like $0 to $5,000 worth of contracted services. It's just call one, we don't have to call 3, we can call
Nope.
one and get a quote from, I can call Ann if Ann's the
Wait.
interior decorator. And I want to.
You guys are-
No, that's, no, we still have to get 3 verbal quotes.
I just heard
I-
less than 3 verbal quotes, less than 5.
Less than 5,000 is verbal and needs 3.
quotes.
Yep.
And so that includes your donut?
No,
Okay,
they're,
that's-
so I think that's where you guys lean on staff, and we can help you with, if you're going to buy water for an event, you're not gonna have to go get 3 quotes to buy that water. If you're gonna contract Decky to host that event, then you would need to get 3 quotes. So it's just gonna depend on what it is. I don't know that there's a blanket statement that we can answer that with.
Applying rules for an audited account to an account that is only subject to, financial review? Or reviewed financials?
And really my understanding is this is why bids have been developed in the first place, so that we can be more agile than a giant bureaucracy like a city. It seems like the very theory behind that use of the special assessment to be more agile.
And the bids put together a plan of how they wanna spend the money.
Yep.
Council approves that plan, and then the bid should get to spend that money according to the plan. But if everything that we do is a reviewed contract by city staff, then is it the bid that's, in charge of those decisions? Or is it the city staff that's in charge of those decisions?
It's the bid. You're still doing what you want. We just make sure the contract meets the legal requirements that it needs. We're not saying we're reviewing this to decide if you guys can do this or not. You still can do it. It's just, does this agreement meet the legal requirements?
Clients.
Yeah.
The legal requirements for a contract outlined.
Well, I think that's the kind of separate procedure guide that we were talking about.
Yeah, and I think that's gonna be more legal, reviewing it to determine, does it have the things that are required? Is there language in there? Like for example, with the DECI contract, it was put in the proposal to do minutes. Well, we know city staff has to do the minutes, so the contract, instead of saying, they'll do minutes, might say take notes in meetings. So, they'll review some of the stuff like that to make sure it's meeting all the requirements.
Yeah, so say we're not in Northfire, we're in Milwaukee, and instead of $100,000 budget, my bid has a $2 million budget. We hire an executive director. Do you think that that executive director is having all of the contracts for a $2 million budget, reviewed by city hall staff? And then weeks later, being told, okay, you're okay to sign this?
Yeah.
Do you think so?
I would suspect that if they're issuing, their RFPs or whatnot, the same as like the city engineer would down there. Or if they want to hire somebody to do garbage service, that they would put I'm guessing that bid executive was hired with the city HR policies, and I think the kind of contracting would be I would think it would be the same. But to make things more nimble, I think you made the comment for bid being, developed. If you contract with DECI or an outside agency, you're just holding DECI responsible to provide the services. We don't care, if DECI is hiring you, like your associates, they put in on, like for Dewey Street Bridge, we have a contract with theirs, and they have to stay within their budget, but if they want to swap out the soil borings, from Short Elliott Hendrickson and Chippewa to Cedar Core and Omni, they can go and do that. They can hire them how they want. They don't have to get 3 quotes. We just have to follow our city procurement with the contract that we have with theirs. So that gives you that flexibility, behind the scenes of that professional entity that is enabling and accomplishing your operating plan.
So could all 4 of us bids put 100% of our budget to DECI?
That's what North Barstow's doing.
Yeah.
Except for, I didn't include, capital improvements to property, because I figured, I don't know. It's so long ago, I can't remember it, but.
Well, and I don't think you guys fully decided what you want to
It's
do. And
usually on city property because we don't have our own property, so if we're gonna do capital improvements to property, I figured we should be hand in hand with Steve Plaza or whatever city department those improvements are going into. I don't know if we'll do it again that way this year or next year. So would you say that this paragraph that we're discussing it does give the bid the right to contract. So the contract will be between the bid and the entity, let's pick Decky.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to specify that Decky then does not have to follow city contract review, or, you know, like the city's not going to need to see the contracts that Decky enters into.
I don't know how, I can try to grab like one of our engineering contracts on there. I don't know what the standard language is, if we spell it out, or if it's just practice, that states, you know, and law. We hold, maybe it's the only.
So for an example, Catholic Charities, I do, they act as the operator or the fiscal sponsor for Community Haven House. So they send me an invoice, once a month. And so that invoice details out what the payments are for, but they have an agreement for their cell phone service. We did not have to take that through procurement policy because we did an agreement to pay funds to Catholic Charities, their rug cleaning, mats, just different things. So all they do, they send me an invoice and then all the supporting documents that show, okay, employee wages was X amount. Well, it breaks it down. Here was their wages. Here was their insurance. Here was this. And so we're like, yep, those are all things that we would pay within the contract with Catholic Charities. They have, you know, a line for the rugs, the mats. They include their invoice. Yep, that's exactly what it is. So that would be the same thing that happens with Decky. They'll just have to send us an invoice with the supporting document with it.
I think that's a key question that Julia's asked, and I guess a related question. So as I read in the middle of that paragraph, this requires the board to negotiate with providers of services and materials, enter into various contracts. Does that mean, say, an outside entity was contracted kind of writ large for all of it? Does this language unintentionally require that the board take action to allow the outside entity to select subcontractors? Does that make sense? Is the language to all or nothing required to review contracts or negotiate? Would that unintentionally, as written, inhibit an outside agent from effectuating the operating plan?
I don't think I read it that, I see what you're getting at,
But
but I
that's
don't, I
not
don't
a-
read it that way.
Okay.
I think, you know, there's the intent that it might take various contracts to complete the operating plan.
Mhm.
That certainly wouldn't be necessary if everybody contracted with one to complete it.
That was the main question I had as I read it, maybe an additional sentence indicating that's not intended to
Sure.
constrain the what have you.
But, yeah, I mean, they could if they wanted to. If you had a bid board that was more micromanaged, they could work
I
spell out
suppose,
in the
yeah.
RFP when they hire them, they want to have some control, but
Yeah. It'd be kind of contract specific depending on what agent they're engaging
depending
with.
upon, you know, the personality of the bid directors at the time.
Yeah.
What is the definition of borrowed funds? That's different than reserves.
Yeah, it means they can't take out a loan.
And it says may not contract for amounts in excess of the authorized budget. Sometimes we go into reserves or something that's not true.
Sure, so we can change that for sure to make it clear that if there's money in your account, that you could use it.
Yep. And then that's a fine, that's a city policy that you can only contract for up to 1 year.
And that's because your budget's only for 1 year, but what we'll do, on those agreements, like, I think Julia had 3 years with Decky, so we'll put in there that, you know, this agreement will continue for 3 years, with mutual agreement and budgetary, allotment, something like that. So, because they can choose they could get a new board and they could be like, no, we're not budgeting money for that. And so you don't want to have a contract, kind of like council, you can't bind them for funding in future years. But we can put language in it to make it a ongoing contract for, you know, a set number of years forever and, you know, as long as the budget's approved for it.
The statement gives me pause, to monitor the effectiveness of the district's activities. It sounds vague enough to, like, just, what do you mean monitor the effectiveness? Like, do we have to record an ROI? You know what I mean?
I think that tells me you guys, when like you contract for the electric outlets, you're making sure the work's been done. Don't know.
Well, and I think even a little broader than that, that I think every year you look at it and say, okay, are these contracts serving us and our goals? And if not, then they're not being effective and we should change that. If they
Yeah.
are, great, let's carry on.
But who should change that?
But
Well,
I think
it would be the board, that's
do
right.
that
Yeah.
on an annual basis and, like, you know, create a plan accordingly, but this sounds like we have a requirement to do some measured. I mean, to me, the way I read it is, like, if I told someone in a job description that you have a what is requirement to monitor the effectiveness of the district's activities, like, that's different than aim to make your investments effective. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because we helped pay for a mural, and I'm not going to do a survey or traffic count or social media review of whether or not that, you know, had some sort of impact and therefore drove business to the businesses within our district.
Yeah.
It just, that's the kind of thing where I read it and it's like, I don't feel like I probably judge ourselves as we're failing that. We're not monitoring its effectiveness. I defined how to monitor it. I'm not reporting them.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
when you have your meetings, you guys do talk about stuff like that, at least in some of them, like, has this been a good partnership? There was, I don't remember which bid, they were like, I think for the music, South Barstow, when the current agreement ends, they wanna pursue and see what else might be out there instead of just continuing like they have been. Doesn't mean they won't continue that one, but they want to step back and see, hey, are there other options out there that might serve us better?
It sounds like it's a requirement of the board, and without defining it further, I can't, like, in good faith, put it in there and say, like, hey, Elena.
Yeah, I don't, if you want to strike that together, I don't have any concern about that. I guess my only slight hesitation maybe would be to make sure that you're not just continuing something year to year just because it's always been done. You know, like you've just always,
And we can
Put
say that
something-
we strategically invest our money somewhere, like, that I feel like we absolutely do. I just would hate to put an expectation in our operating plan that we don't have a plan that matches up with the language in there. And that's kind of like the whole brevity thing, is like, I wanna take this seriously, but I feel like, you know, we should understand and actually do the things that are in our operating plan. If there's too much kind of fluff in between, I can't focus on the things that, like, we're actually committed to.
So monitor implies a metric that we
Yeah,
don't
To me, that
have necessarily, but to consider the effectiveness or consider the strategic.
Invest to meet your goals.
Does everybody like that language instead of to monitor the effectiveness, to strategically invest to meet the goals, or? Okay.
Back at the very beginning.
Yeah.
So you guys want to strike that out? Right.
Is the intent, you think that the operating plans would be renewed and considered alongside approval of the operating budget?
Yep.
So,
That'd be the
Yeah.
ideal. So every year statute says the board shall annually consider and may make changes to the operating plan. And then it's submitted for approval to the local legislative body.
and we had been doing just the budgets, but if it's budget and operating plan together, there shouldn't be a period where if there is a potential for a year-to-year or a multi-year contract, assuming funding is available, there shouldn't be lapses.
Right.
Do you think that the language should be added? Because here it says may only contract for up to 1 year term, not to extend beyond the expiration of this operating or authorized budget period. Do you think it would be helpful to clarify that, like, we have the right to make provisions in contracts that state they can be extended, assuming that it's a budgeted expense?
Yeah,
Because right here it
multi-year
sounds
contracts are
limiting.
permissible pending availability of approved budget authority to continue the,
Because Billy, just, for sake of someone being able to follow this and understand and have almost that understanding or right. I mean, I think it's,
So would this be like, if you did contract for everything with Becky, you'd issue an RFP this year, and that same RFP could be used for the next 3 years. You'd be under contract this year. Your budget hasn't been set for year 2 and 3 yet, but when the budget is approved, you've already gone through the RFP process this year, and it's just a matter of signing the paperwork. Is that acceptable?
My understanding, if you have that language in there that, if both parties mutually agree to continue and the budget, is appropriated, the contract, can extend year to year. So it's just having that language. You could set how many years it could extend. You could leave it open to extend until both parties decide, or one decides it's not working. I think yours was 3 years. So if you want to try it for 3 years and reevaluate and do new RFPs to see if something, different has come along that may be of interest. So there's really a lot of availability in that like sentence to make a multi-year, so you don't have to do an RFP every year. Because that was one of the concerns with this, having to spend a bunch of time doing RFPs and getting quotes every year. But we can avoid it by putting it in agreement how you guys prefer it.
So this language here can change to reflect that.
Yep.
The city contract should go.
I think that's worth articulating if it's a permissible
Yeah.
practice, yeah.
So it's kind of like a month-to-month lease. As long as everybody's okay, then it just continues. But the lease is only for 30 days or whatever. So,
So you would add language. there.
yep, we'll add some language there. Anything else in this section?
No.
Are we good? Yeah.
I just had one thing in, wait, where are we at right now? Are we in G?
Nope, we're finishing up C.
Okay,
We're just about.
okay.
I mean, I
Good.
still feel like I would like to, I don't know, maybe even a second opinion or to re-ask. Oh, I actually do, yeah. And written guidance created from the city's finance department. I'm probably not on board with that language, because I feel like that's just opening to say, here are the rules and anything else we say in the future. And then also, just before we move on from C, expenditures and financing method, this whole question of why there's a provision that says if your balance in a segregated account is below $300,000, like you have a set of rules. And if it's above $300,000, you have a different set of rules. Why, like, I just would still like as another investigation into if it's in the state statute for bids, that there's this differentiation, how does that apply to us?
Okay. Yeah, and we'll check on that. What was the statute number
I mean, it's C2,
Yeah,
and in the bid stuff? Okay.
yeah.
All right, so we'll take a look at that and get an answer for you.
Point. Did,
Yeah.
Okay.
And
The
C
second
one
indented
says
one.
that if the balance is
Page 2.
above 300,000 at any time, municipality shall obtain an independent certified audit of the implementation of the operating plan. So the attorney that I talked to, thought that that was significant and gave us kind of a different set of rules than what the city would have to follow.
We will find out for finance on that one. I have not looked at that one personally, and it's not something that would be my area. It's finance, so we'll find out.
Thank you.
to your first point, Julia, I guess I read the written guidance created by the city's finance department. I guess I read that as whatever the procedure guide.
Like the
would be.
procurement
So instead of
policy and-
naming,
Yeah,
here's the name of this thing, here's who
or
is the,
credit card
Authority
or
on
gift card policy, just the different policies that can, donation policy or,
Yeah, I would say the issue with new policies getting written in reaction to bid activities that like we've done for years is a source of frustration, because it seems like oh, we just wrote a rule that actually says you can't do that the way that you've been doing it. Do you know
So,
what I mean?
I get it, and the procurement policy, is it new? It wasn't being followed, even by city staff. We all, I would, even Dave had to go back and do a bunch of work to, so, and I get what you say. We don't want it to be able to be retaliatory or look that it is, but
Or like, hey, you guys wrote a grant process 3 years ago and you've been, refining your rules every year to like, make it the best grant process, that your bid is, like meeting our goals. I feel like it's been a great thing for us. And then it's like, oh, well, these new rules might apply. Like, hold your breath and we'll find out. That's frustrating.
right, and that's why I'm working proactively to try and figure a lot of that stuff out. So if we do need to tweak your grant process to make sure when we send something to accounting, they're not like, nope, can't pay this. So to make sure we're doing it right on the front end,
Yeah.
and try to solve all that, because we all know what, it was tough on the back end when we had to go back and South Barstow really with the invoices and working to get all the information we were being required to submit before a county would pay them. So that's why I'm trying to proactively address it. So as we make changes and stuff, I'll check with the appropriate departments and say, hey, does this change anything that could impact the work that they're doing? So. Because I don't want that frustration either. All right, moving on to D. All right, organization of the district board. These are, there'll be a lot of similarities, but there will be differences amongst the bids. So it talks about, the Wisconsin statute, that the bids are managed by a public board of the city, which are required to have a minimum of 5 members. A majority of the members of each bid board must be owners or tenants of commercial property within the bid, but other city residents are also eligible for membership and encouraged to apply for consideration. Bid,
Or this.
Not in so many words. Based on its setup, it is.
Because it doesn't establish it as a creation of something else. It's kind of de facto. It's my understanding of statute writing.
Well, certainly there's nothing else designated, but because it's created by act of city council, appointed by city council, it is a city board,
Bid board membership is approved by the city council following recommendation from the city's advisory committee on appointments pursuant to city charter ordinance, and the members serve staggered terms as designated by the council. So I know there's going to be some concerns over that verbiage. Right now, it just says, here's what the minimum required by state law. I think there's going to be another meeting with the appointment committee for them to work on what their policy will be, and they'll go back to the council to determine what policy will be. Right now, it's on hold to continue doing as is. So I think hopefully they're supposed to meet this spring. By the time they do and get that done, we can update some of this language, or we leave it, here's the general, but then each board puts within what council has decided as policy, puts within their board composition and stuff, what it'll look like. But the minimum that's required by the state law, we can't go below that. So if for some reason Anne would decide, nope, only one business owner and we want the rest to be residents, we couldn't do that. So the minimum expectations will probably still be in there, but each bid board within what the council determines as policy can decide more on the composition part of it. And that's point 2.
So the appointments committee is going to discuss priority, what are they discussing?
So in the last meeting we had with Andrew Worthman, when he talked about what the appointment committee wanted to do, he said that he was going to go back to the appointment committee, share your guys' feedback. He did, and they decided to not change anything at that time, but that they would have a meeting again in the spring to talk about the bids before any decisions were made. They might not change anything. They might have each bid go ahead and do what's in their operating plans. They might decide to do what the state law says, but they'll take that to the full council to determine, my understanding, to determine what the final policy will be.
Is part of this having, is it my understanding bid members don't currently fill out the same application form? Is that
We've resolved that piece of it. It's just
Okay.
the bid board makeup. So by law, anybody in the city of Eau Claire could serve on a bid board, but that's the minimum requirement. So it's going to be up to council to decide if that's what their policy is, that they will look at appointing people who live outside or, are just residents, or if they're going to go by what North Barstow currently has, that it has to be owners or businesses within the bid boundaries, or somewhere in between,
I would think that the city council approved an operating plan, that it should follow the approved operating plan when they're deciding.
Are you clearly stating that the authority to decide the makeup of the boards rests with this committee?
With council, guided by what the state law says.
I understand the state law is like, has to be at least 5 members, right? That's it. Oh, yeah.
And the majority.
So we set the state law aside, and I want to know, is it the authority of the bid in its operating agreement to set the makeup of its board, and that can be approved or not by city council?
Correct,
Yes, it is that authority. Okay.
correct.
Well, I guess I would,
But-
I would quite agree on that. They can, the bid board can decide how many members, like you're saying, the minimum is 5. They can decide if they want more than that. I know we have some boards with many members.
Yep.
And they can determine how many are on there, but it's up to city council through their appointment process to decide who fills those positions. So all that statute says is that a majority of those members have to be property owners or business owners or tenants within that district.
So am I taking that, am I hearing this correctly then, that you're saying our current operating agreement that states that every board seat has to come from our bid is illegal or not allowed, or we don't get picked up?
But it's not illegal.
It's not illegal.
So,
I just, that's what it feels
Right.
legal.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is
not.
the heart, that's.
It-
Okay.
It meets what the state says, but,
State says it has to be at least 5.
right, and council could decide that, that the, majority have to be within the bid, but the rest can be residents from Eau Claire. But that's gonna be a conversation that council will have with you guys. That's not something that we can determine here today. They're gonna meet with you guys again, hopefully soon. Spring's coming, even though it doesn't feel like it, to get that worked out. And I think they'll work on a, something that's gonna be agreeable for everybody. There may be give and takes on each side, but I have my thoughts.
Will city staff be giving the city council recommendations?
I think that would be
I would say, if I had my brothers, I would still encourage the bids to, talk about future board candidates and even vote on them in your bid meeting as a recommendation to council.
Yeah.
So what happens now, like with plan commission, but just for example, if there's an opening on plan commission, Aaron White, who is our staff liaison with that committee, may know people that filled out the resource bank and have contact with them and say, well, I think this person is an expert in this kind of planning, or this person is an expert in development. And staff gives advice for those things. But as far as it is.
So they're citywide committee, correct?
Correct, but the appointment still, still that same advisory committee on appointments, which are 3 council members.
Yep.
Yeah, so just if I can chime in, because I sat that committee and I've gone to all of them, and the membership didn't seem like a sticking point, the composition didn't seem like a sticking point, but the council had expressed, I mean, not the council, but that subcommittee had expressed an interest in not just rubber stamping the appointments. There were some where they wanted to reject the appointment. And a lot of this discussion started because they had asked, what powers does the council have to potentially reject them? And I don't know if they changed the opinion on that, if that was a request, was to not just rubber stamp the appointments.
And are you referring to a bid board appointment, or are you referring to the example you said?
Well, also, he's talking about this specifically. The other ones, they already got like a roster, a list of options with supplemental material, and then they picked among them.
Okay.
But the bids, it was just a list of names and was automatically approved. And they said, why do we automatically approve these? Why don't we get supplemental information like we do with the other appointments and have some ability to reject any of the candidates?
You want to resolve that part by the application process now?
Well, I think it will still come up that there may be time, I mean, unless they change their mind about this, that they had anyway, at least intended to be able to have an option to reject the candidate or to, and maybe it's iterative, so they say, please suggest a different person. I mean, it could be a discussion, but to me, it would probably be analogous to how the city ones work. So the staff might say, oh, we like this person, and sometimes they take that advice and sometimes they don't. as how our others.
So that's about approval of an individual, but
Right.
there's a different question about who decides.
The composition.
Composition is.
And I haven't heard, I'm just saying that I hadn't heard them talk about that in like, that wasn't, to them, it was more about having some say in the appointment.
So the bylaws for North Barstow say the board shall nominate candidates for open director seats to be brought forward for the appointment by the city manager and approval by city council. And that, I think, is better in line with the state statute that says the chief executive officer shall appoint members to a business improvement district board to implement the operating plan. Board members shall be confirmed by the local legislative body and then shall serve terms. So to me, what is written here saying that there's going to be a decision made by a committee and then, yeah, a recommendation or decision from the pool, from the city advisory committee on appointments, and then confirmed by city council, that does not align with the city, with the state statute as I read it.
So what the city and, sorry, say-
No, go ahead.
so the city, I don't even know when, but passed a charter ordinance so that it is a little different than the statute, because you're right, we don't follow a manager appointment to bids or to any committee. Because we have that charter ordinance that says in lieu of that, we have this subcommittee of the council that does that process instead. That's why you're entirely correct on that one. It doesn't quite match, but that is why.
I still like the language that the board shall nominate candidates for open director seat to be brought forward for appointment by the committee and approved by the city council. And the issue of them not getting the options seems to be resolved by using the resource bank.
Right, and we can add that in here that bid boards can review applications and make a recommendation to the advisory committee, kind of like staff does.
But this is just really written like short and easy to understand. That the board shall nominate candidates to open director seats to be brought forward. You know what I mean? Like that, sorry.
Yep, no, I get
I
that.
don't mean to sound stupid.
No,
But,
no,
like,
no.
You know, like the extra language,
It's cumbersome.
it makes it less approachable, and just easy to follow through with.
I mean, bids are not, bids are just, no, bid board is different than a citywide committee. Their purpose is different, the statutes are different. You know, and that means their makeup is different. Really, if you're talking about expertise, it is the business owners and occupiers that really are the experts, you know, within that. And so I do believe that the appointment committee should consider the approved city council operating plans.
Yeah.
When they're making that consideration, when they're trying to move forward. A slate of board candidates.
And the bid board has to approve the operating plan to be presented to council, and the bid board says that all members shall be, you know, have investment or what is the, an interest, a business interest in real estate or business. You know, to be considered. Also, I think membership in the first paragraph is confusing, and it should only be mentioned in board composition so that there's not two places to make adjustments. Do you know what I mean? Because it's referenced both places.
So this is where I was gonna chime in a little bit on the board composition thing. I've been in meetings where we're talking about this, that maybe in addition to owners or tenants, there be like representative or something like that in there, because, you know, maybe it's not the owner of the business or the owner of the building, but the manager of a restaurant or something, something like that.
Occupy property.
Hmm?
Where's the occupied?
Yeah, or occupy property.
And the statute says own or occupy, so we have to, those are our constraints as far as the majority of the board, but as far as the rest of the composition, it could be open.
I don't own the property.
So you say owners or tenants of commercial property, and you're saying that,
I'm not an owner or a tenant, I occupy. I
yeah,
mean, 6,000 people own that building.
yeah. We were joking that if you want to be on the bid, you should become an
Oh,
owner
yeah.
of the co-op, but it also says no more than one representative of any entity, which seems a little contra to saying that you know, like you could be a city resident. You know, so I'd be like, oh, I'm not a representative of the co-op, I'm just a resident. So why is it,
Then there could be two of us, you're saying, one of us is a resident, or, all right.
yeah, so that it seems so easy to get around if you're allowing residents in, that why even have it in there?
I definitely don't, like, what Diana Hill, but I do think somebody like the downtown, neighborhood association, I think that they would be great contributors, so even if like, you know, they would be there showing up, tons of volunteers, return up volunteers, and have interesting ideas, and they really are your customers, I think, because they have like, you know, discretionary income and they love the downtown, so I don't know. I mean, it's just something for you guys to think about, but I do think there are other talent, you know, excited people who really are passionate about what you're doing and want to show up and help.
And should get a vote on what the tax rate for the businesses will be?
They're spending the money that pays for the tax. I mean,
But these meetings are you know, what I mean, these are public meetings, so the neighborhood association, somebody
Yeah.
from the neighborhood association could come and contribute or.
And they are paying the taxes in, because I don't think businesses are just taking a hit on that money. I'm guessing that's being passed on to customers.
Not
So
Is
I
there,
feel like they are paying into it,
That operates at a large loss every year in.
except for you. But no, I think most businesses do pass it on. So if it is somebody that lives downtown, and I could see them being like, hey, I love these flower pots. I would like to see more, and wanting to be a part of that conversation. And
be a part of it without being forced.
It
But-
also be has to
yeah.
figure out the makeup of the board, we need to figure out
Yep.
who's allowed to figure out the makeup of.
yeah,
do,
and
do we need to define appointments as either owner, occupier, and at large or something to, I think the conflict point of, say, somebody from RCU who's on a board as part of their job, somebody who works at RCU and chooses to join because of an interest, and then you suddenly have two people from one entity. So
I-
What about
I-
a husband and a wife that own
Yeah.
several properties in town?
Oh.
Can they be
I-
sitting together on a board because they own two properties in the bid?
I think we wait and see. Yeah, I think we wait and see what the appointment committee out of the meeting they have with the bids decide on that piece. And then we update language based on what they decide. Cause we could sit and talk about it and say,
Right.
you know, but it's gonna come down to that meeting. And it sounds like from what Stephanie's saying, they want to keep with you guys, you know, making recommendations of business or property owners within. They just want to be able to reject candidates if they see fit. So,
Yeah.
so I think waiting until we have that meeting to finalize that piece would make sense.
So just to jump ahead then to like 3A, 2 consecutive terms, 2-term limit. Is that another example of you think that is not to be decided at all by the bids, but is in the hands of this appointment committee?
I would use any of this language, no offense.
So I think that would be a difficult one that we would need to discuss with the appointment committee and council. I don't know where they might be leaning, but for Ann, that would be impossible for West Grand bid.
Like 10 point.
Because they only have so many businesses in there. That is typical amongst our different boards, that there are term limits to keep it turning over. I think you guys are a little different because your pull is more limited. That is, if they don't change that piece of it, which it sounds like there are. So I think that's something that would be discussed with the appointment committee when they meet with you guys.
And I know this is kind of an extreme example, but the bid board can put anything they want in this operating plan and submit it for approval to city council. And then city council can, be told by staff or attorney that like, no, you would be like, you're breaking state statute if you leave that, or if you pass this, like, that doesn't fly. But in that rationale, I think we can absolutely, have this term however the bid board wants it and wants it presented to city council. And it's really the agreement between our bid board and the city council.
Julia, I couldn't agree more. That's how it should work. We
Yep,
should be able to start with what we want, and the attorneys are here to tell us, is this legal or not, to advise the city council when they say yes or no to our plan.
And that's why the appointment committee wants to meet again to come to a point of agreement, because when they came to that last meeting, there was a lot of the stuff they wanted to change, and then they heard everybody and they're like, wait, let's back up and let's sit down and talk about this again, because what we're wanting to do, you guys aren't happy about, and we want to find a solution that works for everybody.
And I guess my point is, city council will hear from that appointment committee whenever we present, sorry, you guys are in the room, so I keep pointing to you, whenever we present our operating plan. So they can, be represented on whether or not, they support the operating plan because of. But I don't understand a scenario in which we submit an operating plan, it gets approved, and then this committee gets to proceed or like change parts of our approved operating plan.
So that meeting, before we finalize this piece, that meeting will occur so that we make sure we're doing what council wants.
And the bid board could still include a provision that the committee doesn't want. And then it would be up to council to either approve or reject that operating.
Yeah, my understanding is the committee would take what they want to do to council for a final policy decision. I don't know if I'm right or wrong on that.
So I'm just trying to think of the sequence. We have another advisory committee of appointments meeting on the agenda for March 7th. I don't know that this was on the agenda, but it could be. And the specific question would be, what is the composition and the appointment process and the terms? Is that what you're saying?
Just-
What they would want to talk about?
Well, it depends of what,
But
Like if we wanted to use that as the meeting, then you guys could just kind of go to that and talk about it with them.
Yeah, because we only met with one person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With one person, and then I think that they didn't really understand the difference between, like a citywide policy committee and a bid board. And I don't think that at that time that was very clear.
Well, there's been a lot more discussions.
Yeah.
You guys could go.
I did think that would be clear. I did think it would be.
Yeah, it's
So-
3 people. You could we could set aside that meeting or we can set up another one. And if you want to try to get that clarity, and then, like you said, when you're, like Julia said, when the operating plan, I guess, or the bylaws go before the council, then they would have had a chance to, that piece of it would have already been looked at by both the advisory committee appointments, who then report back to the full council. And presumably it would be a resolved issue then. Is that what you're saying?
so if it's going to be that March meeting, can you let me know soon so I can get something out so everybody can have it on their schedule?
I guess it's kind of up to you guys if you want.
I think it would be good in the, efficiency, spirit, so that there's fewer backs and forths, and, then any decisions that, like, for example, the North Barstow bid makes on what to include in a draft in April, You know, if we had, well, we know they're supportive of this and we know that it's probably gonna get rejected if it has this.
Yep.
Because like we only meet, every 2 months. We only meet quarterly. And Potter Street is maybe like, I don't know, once a year, I know it at least happens, but so any back and forth of an operating plan, it is in conflict with being able to have a budget approved in the city's timeline.
So we'll plan on the March meeting. What date did you say that was, Stephanie? 7th? And we'll probably need to reserve here or council chambers.
I gotta check with the chair of it,
Okay.
but you could say tentatively March 7th. From 3:30 to 5 p.m.
All right.
In Parks, but that would keep you there.
Yeah.
Meeting on Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
And I-
Yeah, if you let me know as soon as possible, then I can get something out to the bids.
Yeah.
It'd be good to move things in sequence so we do
Mhm.
reduce the number of times we have to go back to make adjustments at the same
Yep.
time, knowing that this will all also still be in flux at that time. I would hate for it to become a flashpoint of,
Right.
oh, Betty wants to do this, or we want to do this, or we need to come fight about it. So to the extent this can be I don't know if that meeting can be a continuation of this meeting to some degree or similar representatives, but it seems that can be a constructive path forward. I would just hate for it to.
I'm sorry, then also note that it would have to go before the council, so that would be either March 10th and 11th, which would probably be too soon. So it would have to be the second meeting in March. So we could even do it sooner than that. If you wanted, I think you guys tell us what, or somebody think about what the timeline is and then we'll backward.
Well, February's almost over, so
Yeah.
sooner we could do, but it would be short notice for a lot of people. So I think if the appointment committee, so
But then March 7th, and then it would go on the full council agenda, the second meeting in March.
okay.
I think that makes sense, and hopefully we've seen a reorganized draft of this before.
They do a report out from the committee meeting, so ultimately it's the whole council that decides on the topics. I think we said were composition, the appointment process and terms. Whatever you guys just talked about, those would be the ones that they review that language and then come to a recommendation for the full council. And then you can have, if you want to have a public discussion, you can on Monday.
Given that the bids are so different, I wonder if having a policy that, like a blanket policy for all of them on appointments makes sense.
Yeah, I think it would, so it's not as confusing. There might be differences in, board size, you would want a bigger one with South Barstow being a bigger district. West Grand's gonna be smaller. So some of those things could be a little different, but I think the overall process will be the same for the bids.
I mean, you just, cover it.
I agree. I'm trying to think of is there a one sentence question we can put forward to them on, what does the city's advisory committee on appointments recommend to the city council regarding whether bid district boards are held to the same process, or this where I'm brainstorming, held to the same process as other city committees, or if committee recommends the city council accept the bid board's determinations on process for nominations pending operation agreements, or it would be nice to give a bit of boundary.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think for the most part, a lot of it'll be the same, but there has to be some flexibility within the bids, because what if North Barstow does decide that, well, we do want someone from this neighborhood association on here. We think that would be great. if we bind all of them to business or, business owners or property owners, then that might not allow them to do that. So we'll put like minimums, probably, I would, assume, minimums, and then each board can make a decision outside of that, for full council to review in their operating plans.
Yeah, I do think that there has to be some operating.
Yeah.
So that they don't, right, so they don't supersede an already approved city council operating plan. But I do think growth has come from 0 to a lot about the purpose and structure and businesses of the board as opposed to a citywide policy. So we're learning as we go.
And I think
all-
even though like, Ann, your board's never gonna turn over, I think terms are important.
I totally agree.
But not limiting how many terms people can have, because there may be times that, from my perspective, it may be advantage to everyone for certain people to leave bids. So having that authority at an end of term or something may be a positive, or maybe something the council would want. And we'll just leave it at that.
I agree, and I think
Yeah.
some of that is probably already written in those essentially bylaws for some of those larger bids, because their structure is also different. How many times they meet, you have an executive board,
Yep.
subcommittees, there's a lot of things, a lot of structure that's already there that kind of rules, legal stuff, and so it is very, very common and recommended to have term limits. Except for weirdo small ones. But in general, that is always better.
So can you just say, what's, maybe this is happening later, but if you have the advisory committee appointments on March 7th, consider this, goes before the council, the second meeting of March, and then you guys finalize your operating plans like April, and then those go before the council.
That's ambitious, but.
Yeah, well, I think we would submit them with the budgets.
But, so,
No, I
like,
mean,
this was written for 2025, so to me, this was contemplating a mid-year replacement of our operating plan. I think that is smart, because I would hate to get to August when our budget, like, is due,
Yeah.
and for us to get rejected on our operating plan because we refused to add term limits to our, so now finance is going, you guys didn't approve your budget because you didn't approve your operating plan.
Yep.
Like, and so we've got April, June, and August before our budget is due. I don't know that we're actually going to, as a bid board, agree on an operating plan in April. That's a heavy lift, and it would probably even take some, like, okay, well, let's vote on certain terms, and then you have to authorize me to help clean this up in order to submit it, so
Yep.
like, I don't.
So
know
we
if they're
can
going
work
to be
together
comfortable with
and-
that.
yeah.
Some board members might want to see the final before it gets submitted to council, so.
If that was the case,
Yeah.
could I do an email vote, or does it have to be a meeting? It has to be a
No,
meeting
yeah,
because
it
of
has to
open
be.
law. Yep. I tried.
And
No
it's
email.
funny that our bylaw changes, according to our bylaws, require 15 days notice of like, here's the suggested bylaw change. And we do not have anything set in place for changes to an operating plan. So, I mean, that's one of the things that like I don't know, that seems more like a bylaws thing, but to, present something at a meeting without like prior notice, asking for operating changes, like that might be something that,
Yeah.
would you incorporate an operating plan that
Yeah, you can.
any?
So,
There's no reason you can't.
and I think kind of the new process we set that we're gonna do with all the bids of the packet being out in ample time for people to review it. I think that will help solve that. So if we require all packet materials due with the agenda, then we should be able to have the packet ready the Thursday, the week before the meeting. So that gives people, worst case, if the meeting's on a Monday, 3 full days to review the packet.
Yeah, and even
Um,
3 business days is better than 15 because I felt like that kept us from being able to act for like 3/4 of a year, and that was very frustrating. But I also think that bringing in 21-page operating plan to a meeting and say, do you
Yep.
approve this,
Yeah.
doesn't feel fair either.
Nope, we'll get it out in the packet for whatever meeting it's going to. And like you said, that meeting seemed to run a lot better besides one minor hiccup. And I think that's because everybody had the materials in advance. For the most part, most of them were prepared, and it just helped the conversations go quicker when people had a chance to go through everything and understand it. So, all right, so we'll revisit the board information. Move on to method of assessment, or are we staying on more board information?
Well, do we include a representative of, like, I do think that makes sense, like if, I don't know how the co-op would pick you as their representative, but, because there's so many different structures. I
So
think
to say tenant or representative of the, include just also a representative of the business?
The state law says must own or occupy commercial property, so it feels like if you
Just
define
like
the
that.
state language, then it's not.
I love that.
Automatically go to count.
I like it.
Yeah.
So change tenants to occupy? Okay, got it. Got it.
Just thinking logistics, if we meet in April and we say, like, how do we, which version do we want to incorporate in our operating plan? Can they authorize me to clean it up if you require, say 3 days notice of any changes to
Yep.
an operating plan?
They can give you authority to present essentially whatever operating plan you'd be comfortable with.
All right, method of assessment, we ready for that one?
Where are we? To method of assessment is,
Page 7.
okay, my other notes on this one is, somewhere under like board meetings and attendance, I think it should.
Yep.
Spell out who's responsible for agendas. And, thinking through, because it's definitely a feeling that, it's not fair for the bid board to want to discuss something and then it be removed from the agenda, because now under open meeting laws, we can't talk about it. But it's also not fair to say, like, the chairperson is responsible for writing the agenda, because what if city staff wanted to discuss something and now, how could we not goal keep? Or I don't know what the
So
correct term is.
I sent out an email, I think it was last week with Hawk. Me and the Hawk chair we'd schedule a 30-minute meeting. It was really 5 minutes going through the agenda to make sure, hey, we need this, this, and this. Hey, I want this, this, and come to agreement. We spent, either 15 or the rest of the meeting just, hey, how are you doing? How's things going? So a quick meeting with the chair and me, or whoever will be the liaison for the bids.
Yeah.
We can get through that pretty quick. And
But what if Crystal wants to discuss putting rubber duckies, on all the tree branches, and I just will not bring it to the board? Like, I wonder if there's a way to say, like, the bid chair is responsible for the agenda And any bid member or city staff person can request additions to the agenda and, you know, shall not be unreasonably withheld.
Yeah.
But this is not a current
Yeah.
issue, I'm trying to think through, like, it feels like a pain point that we could address and just like get people feeling empowered. That there's not like, I don't know, perverse control issue going on.
So anyone can bring forth anything reasonable.
So I would suggest, you know, a rule for council, and that one's by ordinance, is that 2 council members can put something on an agenda. So maybe we mirror that.
And I don't know who's responsible for like writing up and submitting and posting the agenda.
Well, so the city would be the one creating the agenda, but if you get the 2 members that say, you know, I talked to the chair and the chair doesn't want to do this, but I have a second who will, you know, back this up, then we would put it on as a discussion, as long as the overall governing thing for bids and any of our committees is that it has to be within their scope of work. So as long as it falls within that, then it would go on the agenda.
And then maybe something about like agenda items will not be removed unless there is legal reason and explanation.
So the big one that's out there, that did happen. So with Nikki. So, and I agree, we can put that in there, but that it has happened. So the one with the South Barstow, they'd been removed. It was explained and everything.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
Like,
But taking out the explanation that we couldn't discuss our operating.
Oh, I think we discussed this. Right, it wasn't ready to take action on, but it was remained for discussion, but
It could have been ready to take action.
it hadn't been reviewed by legal or anything yet.
I mean, ours was already approved, so.
But yeah, we can put that in there.
I think if it's under board meetings and just like that seems to be who is in charge of what gets determined. We're limited by open meeting laws. Who is in charge of getting determined what can and cannot be discussed during a meeting? Like, why not have that spelled out?
Well, is it currently an item for more of a procedure guide than this operating plan document? Because if it's, I hesitate to specify any specific individual contact because of illness or staff turnover or what have you. I think different technology that could allow for, you know, all board members or 2 board members to one-way communication with a Google form or something. So I would hate to tie hands too much before we feel like we have it
Yeah,
really well figured out.
I would
But I
say,
think there could be some role for that high-level principle statement in this that then refers to the other thing, and then we get back to readability and usability. But it seems like that could be a much more variable process within the invariable parameters of open meetings law and notice.
so I would probably recommend that the agenda is worked on with the chair and staff liaison or chair's representative. So if they're gone, then whoever their representative is would take it up. If board members want something on there, they can talk to the chair. If the chair's like, absolutely not, they could get a second, send it to me. And then when we reviewed the agenda, I can be like, hey, there's 2 people that want this on. So according to the operating plan, we would need to include this. So that
Makes sense. I guess I'll point out, also on page 6 at the top, the executive committee contemplates some of that.
Yep.
At least using that meeting to create the full board agendas. As a Water Street rep, we don't currently have an executive committee. I think that's something that we want to do anyway, thinking that would have been bylaws, but if it's here, that could take up some of that time. But to Julia's point, then there is to the extent this enshrines the rights or, you know, authority of bid members, a statement of who's allowed to, without getting fully into the process of here's how you do it.
Yep.
That could be worthwhile.
I think that execution of contracts approved by the board just raises logistics questions. Sorry,
Is this an A?
Executive Committee A, yeah. I don't understand if that is saying that all contracts have to come to the board. Or are you directed to enter into a contract by the board and therefore can move forward with the contract?
So the board may grant the executive committee the authority to take action on behalf of the board as needed, including the execution of contracts. So kind of like they've,
Including the execution of contracts by the board. So
On the board's behalf?
what constitutes,
so like some of the stuff that's been done where the board is like, yes, we want a landscaping, agreement done down here. We'll let you, or a committee determine amongst the quotes, which one we would go to.
so maybe it should say execution of contracts if approved by the board? Do you know what am I asking?
Well, I think it's like, does the board tell the executive committee to go figure out finalizing a contract? Or does the board finalize a contract and then say, make sure this happens? So it's a little chicken and egg. I
Yeah.
think just if approved by the board, I think.
So I'm sensitive to it.
Yeah.
We could put if approved by the board, because I don't think anybody wants to spend a bunch of time doing work and then take something to the board and them not approve it. So let them designate if they want somebody to do it first.
I think that's good.
Okay.
And I don't think we've ever had that level of detail in our operating plan. So if it was just removed, and that goes into the handbook too, like that. My other comments on this one is we have a member and officer liability in our bylaws section that I don't know, could be considered adding to this.
Okay.
And again, don't know if that lives within an operating plan, but it's in our bylaws and it's not in this one.
feel like some of that language could be, you could say refer to bylaws or something. Specific bylaws are in there.
So it's my understanding that there will be no bylaws.
Correct.
So you're gonna try and eliminate all the bylaws and just incorporate it inside.
Correct.
Well, that's, yeah,
Under C, it says, so 6C, missing 2 regularly scheduled meetings may be grounds
Five.
for recommendation
I would take that.
to city council. I have this in our bylaws, so I don't know how to apply that because it doesn't say missing 2 consecutive regularly scheduled, missing 2 annually, like within a year, within a 12-month calendar year. Yeah, so that one, we've never acted on it, even probably when we should, but I would say it depends on how many meetings you have in a year too.
Yeah, and I think it's written, I mean, the boards can decide, first of all, it's written to give discretion to the board to decide, okay, this person's habitually missing meetings and maybe they showed up for one and so they don't have some consecutive absences right now.
Yeah.
But, so it gives the boards the flexibility that way, but also to encourage, I know some of our boards have issues meeting quorum.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
I would say if I were to rewrite it, I'd probably say, like, if you've missed a majority of meetings in a 12-month period.
Sure.
I might want someone who shows up and helps me reach the quorum.
And I have a question on one of these. So on B, a quorum shall consist of greater than 50% of current board members. My understanding it was total seats, whether filled or not.
right.
Okay,
That is
so
correct.
that is
Yeah,
what
that's a
that,
change.
okay.
Under resignation, it says that you have to send a letter to a city clerk. That is new. It's always been just board chair. I think I'd prefer it that way.
Yeah.
And you could forward it on to us so that we can update our records, so.
We have a removal provision that says if the board votes, by two-thirds of the vote can remove a director. I don't know what that would be for, but there's no provision in here.
Well, so the Madison did have kind of something along those lines, but it's a recommendation of the city council because the board of itself can't remove a member.
Okay.
So it would be another recommendation. We could put that in, but
I wanna have at least like for cause or for
Yeah.
some, you know, for something,
sure.
some reasonable reason.
If there's malfeasance, but they're great at showing up to regularly scheduled meetings.
So why would your board vote to remove someone?
I mean, you can vote, I mean, I don't think it happens very often, but two, it could be something criminal. Like, you can do that, but criminal, or, you know, not supportive of the goals and mission. Can be grounds also.
I'm done.
All right. Method of assessment. You guys want me to keep reading through these or just jump to your notes? Julia shook her head no. Don't like my reading voice.
This one felt like math, so I didn't. write
Okay.
anything down.
Yeah, this is probably a little complicated accounting stuff, but,
Yeah, I would say this section is, well, to my memory, not included in our current operating plan.
It's something that needs to be articulated, but doesn't need to be near the front of the packet.
so more of an appendix. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Appendix.
We have it in just a few sentences.
Yeah, I guess we do have.
That states at least the assessment method and exemption. An appendix, you could have it longer.
Yeah, we'll move it to the appendix. Comments on this? I see some highlighting.
It's the fourth paragraph, tax key numbers for which they are collected. I don't know that I understand what that means, and it's definitely never been done before, so if that's something that we need to be aware of, we should keep it. If it's a process that doesn't involve the bid, I don't know why it would be included in our bid operating plan, because it's not a responsibility for us to collect or store or review or audit.
We found it in several cities' plans around the state, so that's why we put it in. I think other bids might have an interest in, some of that, but it certainly doesn't have to be there.
I mean,
And I'm not saying we don't have an interest in it because it's never been provided.
Sure.
Sorry, and I didn't mean to. speak
no,
over
but I mean, is it the mill rate? What kind of keep tax numbers are you talking?
Tax key numbers. I assumed that to be the personal numbers and the mill rate and the total assessment is what I would.
Yeah.
Then you're getting
It's
a
just- it's just an
spreadsheet
R.
of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was asked by a couple of the bids to start providing that after the assessment and everything's done. So I put it on my calendar to do it for all bids, like at the first of the year, get all the bids, the information.
So this is a detailed accounting of the amounts received by parcel,
Yep.
by entity or
Yep.
something.
Right, that's great. I just flagged it because it's very unfamiliar.
I think it's something that's been asked about, but not necessarily provided but
Be a
we,
good
but we
practice.
got
It
it.
says the operating plan shall include the following: the special assessment method applicable to the bid.
Yeah, and I think that just keeps us accountable for making sure we're sharing that information with you guys. Because the city shall collect and shall provide to the district's board an accounting of the amounts received. So if it's in there, then it keeps us accountable for getting you the information.
last paragraph is about tax exempt property. And on the first sentence, you know, it indicates that there might be some businesses voluntarily paying into, some nonprofit businesses voluntarily paying into the bid, funds, and just kind of curious, like, who is asking nonprofits to pay into the bid? Are we, like, is that happening in the city of Eau Claire, by who? And then the second part, I don't know, what if, it basically says that if you then further put it in writing, that it will like kind of auto continue to pay into the bid. So that process I'm unfamiliar with.
Yeah, and I think this is new. We found this in, it was for sure in Madison's and I think a few others, that there might be some businesses that either are asked to contribute and choose to do so, or they consent to be assessed, and then that would be an automatic thing unless they opt out. But it doesn't have to be in there. It was a suggestion.
So I would take it out.
Well,
I
it
mean,
seems,
You can have may instead of will. I mean, I run a nonprofit and I have made financial contributions to the bid, or I to cover things that would, but they would have paid for.
The remove will be asked, that just that they can make a voluntary donation.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's asked, you know, is it the board asking? I think that's what you're asking, like, who's that? Who's the asker?
I think that Mayo contributes to the bid and they're a nonprofit and I don't know what agreement that's in. Like that,
So just being a nonprofit doesn't exempt somebody from property taxes. It's a different classification. So Mayo does pay property taxes.
and
Partially.
Churches do not, for example.
Right.
Yeah, but if you have a bid bylaw that says all members of the bid have to be owners or occupiers, there could be, I'm imagining a scenario where a nonprofit, a tax exempt place wants a seat on that board.
we
And
do
so
have,
that's, yeah, and so then that's why they would agree to be assessed.
but they still, even under our current bylaws, even a nonprofit who doesn't contribute to the bid still owns or occupies
Yeah.
property within the bid.
And it could be advantage to have nonprofits within your bid as part of the board.
and it seems like does the second sentence just say if somebody changes their mind and wants to be assessed or contribute to the bid's funding, the bid doesn't have to do anything to accept that? Is it saying they would automatically, I'm subject to, it isn't saying they would be subject to doing so in every future operating plan? Is
It's
that
saying
correct?
that they don't have to reconsent every year, that it would be rolled over. They could withdraw their consent if they chose to.
I had to read it 4 times, but then I was, oh, I think that's straightforward. And
Anything,
I agree that may be asked.
yep, we'll update that piece. Anything else on that part? All right, promotion of orderly development of the city. Thoughts on this one? See that she has highlights on this part over there, so it might be why she stepped out.
Or to try to jump into Julia's mind. Which I don't do often. I would imagine that she might say, for wordiness issues, does this really need to be a whole section? And do we need to say that it's required in this plan, or do we just need to say it? You know what I mean? And so that middle paragraph is sort of what maybe is the actual introduction to this entire document. You know what I mean? Like it's a statement of purpose, really.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so the operating plan by statute has to contain a description of how the creation of the business improvement district promotes the orderly development of the municipality, including its relationship to any municipal master plan. So that has to be a part of it. How lengthy, how elaborate, that is certainly up for debate, but it does have to be there in some form.
Right, because your comprehensive plans will and should change, right?
Yep.
Right, the next one should be when, this one is 2015,
They're, I think, gonna start working on it in 2026.
2026.
So when that does change, we'll update, it in there and make sure that there's nothing in the operating plans that may conflict with it. I wouldn't imagine there is, based on the work you guys do.
I mean, I don't know that you needed a date on it. I mean, essentially, you're always going to have a comprehensive plan in place.
Maybe say the city's active comprehensive
Yeah,
plan.
regardless. It's very specific. So the next one, plan is say. Not sure it needs all that specific, you know, but certainly the bids play in harmony, work in harmony with the city.
Yep.
I think I've heard questions before about what constitutes benefit to the community at large. I think we see the intangible benefits of that being orderly, but that's the only language that really stands out as, oh, I've heard some people express confusion about that before. Otherwise, I think this is largely restatement, but to Janessa's point, we're required, or it's required that those dots be connected. And I think this does a fairly fine job of that. I think the middle paragraph has some of the language we had talked about near the beginning about goals, including that development of civic activities and facilities. So perhaps that paragraph will change based on the goals each bid takes on, but
You can stop it, vibrant downtown business district, period, and split, and you're done. And I would push.
we'll just keep that first sentence to the second paragraph.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, Janessa?
I think if you take all that out, then you're losing the connection to a master plan, because that first sentence doesn't talk about the comp plan at all. So I think we need to connect the dots there a little bit more. But I'm fine sending it down, beyond to less than what is there, certainly.
Any other thoughts on that piece?
Maybe it's just a third paragraph. Because that is just very specific to the 2015 comprehensive plan.
And we could change that to the city's active comprehensive plan so that it,
It's specific to the 2015.
There will just have to be periodic updates.
yeah, the
I
20,
guess to-
yeah, the 2015's the current one. If we change it from 2015 to the city's active comprehensive plan, then that'll be referring to whichever plan is currently.
But they all have to then update.
Some of the language.
The language
Have to
will be
Yeah.
list some of
Yeah.
the,
very specific to,
Gotcha.
general plan. Whereas the other paragraph is more general.
Last sentence of the last paragraph saying like including policy objectives such as supporting a regional mixed use activity center. Is it saying that's in the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, see, that's why I would make that third paragraph too.
I mean, I don't feel like we do anything related to that, but attracting desired activities, employers, entertainment, civic, regional and cultural resources.
And that's already above in that second code.
Yeah.
I think the second paragraph mirrors the bid specific goals on page 1 of the document, and the third
Mhm.
paragraph then does the same for what's in the comprehensive plan. So I'm not sweating too much over that.
Yeah, and I think just supporting a regional mixed use activity center, if one would come, the bids would be supportive.
And I guess
Supportive depending on, yeah, if they're gonna, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we could just take that
I don't think they have.
We'll take that out.
to the extent that could refer to Pablo Center or Sonatag or,
Right, and if it
yeah,
was gonna
without
be.
delving
just,
into have we achieved that or just a flat wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we can
And if-
strike it, that's easy.
You know, a location comes up that you guys are like, no, we don't, shouldn't, so we'll take that out.
Yeah, I won't support all proposals.
All right, plan approval process. The board shall annually consider, make changes and submit the operating plan to city council for approval. And the statute that establishes the process.
So to me, the first sentence says what the state statute says. And then I get thrown off when it says that the state statute establishes a specific process for reviewing, approving operating plans that the board will follow. Isn't that stated in the first part of the sentence?
Mhm.
So I'd rather not, like, that feels like a loose end of like, you agree to follow it, but I'm not gonna tell you what it is.
Sure.
And then, that would probably be a good place to say, any proposed changes to this operating plan will be presented to the bid board 3 days prior to like them being asked to make changes.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know. Anna, is that a silly addition? I think it's
I think-
good practice.
I mean, it's your practice if you were gonna review your operating plan. I mean, if you already knew what kind of changes you need to, then you can improve it. If you didn't, then I don't know how you do that.
I'm also thinking of the scenario in which the bid board wanted to discuss changes to an operating plan. And then it was removed from the agenda. I mean, I'm under the impression that the bid board could, you know, write any operating plan that didn't meet state statutes, ask city council for approval, and city council would hear from the attorney's office that like, no, you would be putting yourself at liability for approving a plan that doesn't meet city statutes. So like, I still don't understand why it can be removed from an agenda, but if you write rules that say like, hey, any proposed changes will be presented 3 days prior to being considered, I think that firms up the process of being the bid board being able to consider changes. Crystal, as a bid board member, would you want any changes, you know, proposed prior to their meeting?
Yeah, we need time to look at, review, think about, assess, question, right? Yes, yes, yes.
I mean, if it's included in your regular agenda, you know, what I mean, your agenda material, which obviously we try and do in advance, so people can hear all of that. I think that's just a bit up there.
Just trying to avoid a scenario where you public notice the agenda, but the packet isn't available till the night before or something, and then you're trying to make heads or tails of a long document.
All these attempts to put, you know, all materials that would be material for a, you know, a
But-
board meeting.
I do think there's value for thinking of other organizations where you see it as bylaw language, but for this, you know, somebody takes a long weekend, comes back and finds that the organization now serves a fundamentally different purpose because their out of office reply received a notice and they weren't back until after the meeting. So I think there's some institutional or entity integrity to providing that there won't be fly-by-night changes if you've got, you know, you don't want a chair that's trying to outflank the vocal minority of the board or some scenario like that. So I think some kind of minimum for having the document to review in advance of the meeting where it will be, put that. Makes sense. 3 days isn't a ton. 3 business days might. Oh, I don't know how individual boards would feel about that, but arriving at something that's reasonable enough and provides enough notice so that we don't have to have a fight about it later, or not a fight about it, but go through a lengthy discussion about whether or not that meets the needs or why is it in there.
And I think,
Seems common sense enough that we could find something.
yeah, and I think 3 days is very doable with agendas and materials being due Wednesday. We get it out Thursday. That gives at least 3 days if there's a meeting on Monday. And I don't think any of the bids have Monday meetings, but in case something was Monday.
Even if you were waiting on financials or something, the operating plan draft could go right away.
Right, we could do that. We can pull the financials and all that stuff to make the packet.
Yeah.
So we should be able to have the packet done by Thursday unless there's a system issue, and then we could go ahead and send it out. So we could put that in there. This should be doable. I don't see any reason why not.
And especially if city staff says, yep, that's reasonable, then there's like further assurance that it's not gonna be pulled because there wasn't ample time for like legal review, which again, we're just talking about before it gets voted on or presented to the bid board. Not like we're making rules for council.
Yeah. Well, and I'd leave that to you if there's any concerns from a legal perspective on that.
To require advance notice to the board. Changes
Or
in 3
to have legal review before they vote to send it to council.
Well,
Hmm.
before it goes to council, there's the legal opinion that has to go with it that says this meets state statute.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, sounds good.
As
So
I,
make it change operating plans, then it goes from legal first.
before it goes to council, yeah.
Oh,
Anything
oh,
going to
council, yeah.
Gets reviewed by legal.
I'm so, I'm oh, get legally reviewed.
were we saying it, was there some suggestion it should be reviewed by legal before the bid acts on it, so the bid doesn't?
We were
pass
just
something
asking
that
if
gets kicked
that's,
back?
required, but they
Oh.
can review it after the bid passes it, to
it'd be
send to council.
Ideal to, have the time to review it so that we're not,
Right.
getting in a situation where we're approving something that we don't believe is legal, but
But I don't know that we want to tie the hands of
Right.
whatever city attorney's office has
Right.
going on at a given moment, that that's
Mhm.
possible. I think what we just talked about with the 3-day thing could maybe fit in this next section better. Do have a future operating plans changes section coming up next.
It does make sense.
But plan approval process is also, we could choose to put a specific one-time for the 2025 operating plan update for this more monumental one-time thing in that prior section.
Well,
But if we wanted to make that happen in perpetuity, it could be reflected in the next one as well.
yeah, and I think this is a operating plan change, so I think it would fit good there, because you guys have operating plans, so we're changing it.
Okay.
So if I think it'll fit good there, so. Got
Yeah,
it.
I think it goes underneath that. How you change it. It's one thing.
All right, anything on the, changes? We got about 26 minutes left. Okay,
Thank you, Janessa.
yes, sorry.
and then termination of the district, has the statute that governs how they can be terminated. I'd say, now that it's gone, it's interesting that it doesn't spell it out. Just list the statute.
It's kind of one of those, like the appointment of members, the chief executive to the legislative body, but in this instance, the charter ordinance would likely dictate. But I think that would be a very unusual or unprecedented step at this point for any to take, so I don't know that real specific guidance is.
Yeah, and that's just, so many percentage of, either properties or value,
Oh,
to
right,
terminate,
yeah.
yeah, so.
I think it must have been when we were talking about the committee on vacancies. It's like, well, the statute doesn't say the vacancies. Well, referring it to the legislative body refers it to that charter
Yep.
ordinance
Yep.
process.
And then we're almost done here, just, general, see anything of concern there?
Yeah, I think the revoking prior bylaws could take some folks by surprise potentially, but based on this conversation, I think much of, or all of what's in there can be
Yeah.
better incorporated into this on an ongoing basis.
And we can add that and include it in the operating plans, just to kind of help people understand that they're gonna be incorporated into this. If that makes sense, if it makes it less, wait, they're taking our bylaws,
It may not even need to live in the document, but just be in how it's
communicated.
presented at the first opportunity, whether that's some statement from the chair with the packet, or if there's oh Lord, all the documents, but an executive summary of where we were to where we're going with this to help orient people to the larger document, and may or may not be possible, but otherwise section C looks similar to kind of standard language, and certainly want to appropriate the appendices.
All right, anything else?
So as part of our operating plan, then because the statute doesn't require them to push up an operating plan unless you make a change to it. But are you saying that anytime you change like a different budget, it requires that? It doesn't really require, it's only if you're making it, a change to your operating budget that it goes, back to back for approval.
Talking about the language for the annual change.
I mean, the board will look at your operating plan, but if there's no changes, then
Does it have to go to city council?
there's nothing to resubmit.
It would just be included with the budget,
Update
and
the
it can be
year.
noted in the,
Should probably vote on it again, just to.
My only concern is like the city council has to look at hundreds of pages of things, and if there was no change.
and the staff report can say that operating plan had no changes this year.
Important.
Yeah.
I think the statute,
More
says, like,
important.
you should consider it annually, but you may make changes. It doesn't
Yeah.
say you shall make changes.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
you don't have to. And if we submit it with the budget, we can note in the, we do a staff report in front of things that go to council.
Yeah.
So we can put in there, board did not make any changes to the operating plan.
Because I do think once you get an operating plan, it seems like it's working, you're not like using it.
Yeah. Or outline if there were changes, so they're not reading the whole thing, trying to figure out what might have changed.
A lot to digest, no change.
And the way that's written, you'd update the years if nothing else. Right, proposed activities for 2025.
Yep.
I mean, if you had considerable changes in your work plan or something, you know what I mean, but if
Yeah.
it depends on how you're writing your operating plan. But if your goals are the same,
Yeah, some of our commissions, the operating plan stays the same. We just put a new year on it, take it to council, see if they have any feedback or changes they want, and they adopt it, and
Yeah.
we'll move forward. So we'll just submit it with the budget, highlight any changes in the staff report, or say there's no changes, so that they're aware of what's in it.
It might be a reason to like not list the year in so many places, but like in section C, it says the 2025 operating budget is approximately this, instead of like the operating budget is included in appendix D. So then you
Exactly.
just update appendix D rather than,
yes.
version of this.
Yes.
So two items that were not in here, that I was directed to advocate for my board, not officially through a motion, just through conversation, was that, bids are not charged for city staff time. And we've also been working very hard with the RFP for a service provider to not be an extraordinary use of city staff time, like, different than, like, rewind 2 years ago, I didn't know who I was working with on a kiosk in the park, if it was Decky or city staff, but like now that we've delineated between Decky and city staff responsibilities, if city staff is not doing projects for us, but it's doing the state required, filing of meeting minutes, attending meetings, and the financials. I would like to come to agreement within our operating plan and city council, whether or not, we can be charged for city staff time. And I feel like this is going to lead me into point number 2. I would also I plan to include in the version of, the operating plan that we asked for approval from city council, that our bid has the right to hire an attorney if we want to, because this is one of those things where like, maybe we want a second opinion on whether or not it is legally required for the bid board to vote in order to pay city staff. If we got a bill saying you've racked up $10,000 in administrative fees through the city of Oak Cliff, there's state statutes that basically say, bid money is spent with approval of the board. So if we're getting charged by city staff for time, and we're also represented by city staff legally, like, I feel like there's a conflict of interest that allows me to get a second opinion on, like, I think that the city attorney's office by default serves city staff primarily and secondarily the bid board. And if I were to make an argument that, I think this statute says, that, it would require board approval for you to charge us that amount, and you can't just take it from our account. Like, how do I make that argument without the right to an attorney?
Well,
I'm not trying to be a problem child,
I guess the one thing is that, the city council debated that with the resolution that went through and took that part out. But it's the same view, and Billy and I are trying to keep it consistent for purchasing, that the bids are seen as part of the city. Engineering, the city manager's office, Stephanie can't hire with city funds an attorney to represent the manager's office against the attorney's office, or like engineering, if we have a disagreement on something with the attorney's office or with purchasing. I hope it doesn't, we never need
she's
it.
their boss. I'm not their boss.
Well, it's representing the city organization too, not just individual. Maybe think about charging for staff time, but it's the umbrella.
Claire is able to hire an attorney to dispute a finding of the Board of Regents.
Well,
No, because it'd be Office of General Counsel for the whole thing.
And that's what we
Steve versus a second opinion that might be able to write a letter to city council to say like, hey, it is within a bid, like it is not illegal for a bid board to hire an attorney and spend city dollar, or tax dollars to do so. And I've called attorneys and they said that they could represent us. It would just take permission from city council.
Does the city of Appleton have a city attorney?
Not sure.
Because I know that the operating plan or like the bid for Appleton is approved by an outside city per, you know, what I mean, outside lawyer looked at the operating plan. Make sure that it's
See,
okay.
I mean, like, engineering hires engineers to do the engineering work. I think there's a difference. Legal department is bogged down with fighting PFAS and stuff like that, and they have to hire Appleton's bid specific attorney to help with that.
Mhm.
But I think it's a different thing to hire an attorney to counter, internal, legals. I think where and I don't know with the bids, and I completely, believe that with whatever report, 10% of the bids or 10 bids or whatever had outside legal help. I just don't know the nature of that.
Yeah.
If they were fighting with the city or if they just city legal staff, or maybe there wasn't even a legal staff for the city. If it was like Chippewa Falls or Manly or something like that.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to like fight the city or sue, you know, have the bid suing the city. It's just, sometimes I feel like I wish I had a legal opinion on whether or not things that the bid is told they can and cannot do is a legal issue or a staff preference or a written policy or an unwritten policy.
I think that probably a more palpable source, and correct me if I misspeak, Stephanie, like the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, or the ICMA or WCMA, which are not legal boards, but they're professional, like the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. They're a whole host of information, on different things with municipal levy limits to, public engagement techniques. Do a quick search on their,
Is that someone that you receive services because you're a Wisconsin board, or is that someone you hire?
Remember, so
remember stuff.
Okay,
I think there's an annual like dues or something like that, but
They give advice on TIF and they do comparisons statewide, like here's stuff on Verona TIF.
I think,
So would this fall into something that the council voted no on and there's a time limit that before it could be brought back?
Well, I.
Or-
Just in land in the resolution.
the council cut that off.
Okay.
And I didn't, yeah, well, we
Okay.
can't, one thing we absolutely can't do is have different units of the city legally, had different legal representation of the city. You can imagine that we would spend up all of our money just litigating between departments. But I do think that if we can proceed on this path, I know there's no charge for the bids for 25, right? So that's issue, Julie, that at least you'll have some months to see how it works
for 25,
for
yeah.
25, and maybe they'll extend it to 20. That's certainly within the council's authority is to waive fees for. But
Well, I'm reading the state statute that says that I could be charged without board approval.
so, well, I'm just gonna say that I think that we should give all this work that everybody's put in, all these tears that have been cried and all the stress, like we should give it a chance to work. And then I think, we're always evolving and, procurement is super complicated. All this legal stuff is super complicated. We can continue to figure and explore ways not to have we want legal ways that get around the most annoying aspects of our bureaucracy, right? And we can do that together, but we can't have different units spending money, tax money, litigating against each other. That's a very clear line to me and our council shouldn't endorse that. That's not that they basically asking me to do something that is illegal. They can't
I
do
mean-
that. I can't do it.
So like, having an outside counsel look at your operating plan, that's what Appleton, some of them do.
Yeah.
And they have an elected city attorney legal.
So that they could do that at the direction of the city attorney, so it would still be coordinated by the city attorney's office. But if the city attorney and we say, oh, we want somebody who's an expert in bids and figuring out not how to break the rules, but how to legally circumnavigate the rules so that you're least hindered by those in your day-to-day operation, we could do that, but it would be something that we do together.
Yeah, and I don't wanna circumnavigate.
Well, no, I'm saying, navigate is a good thing. I'm just saying, we just can't break the rules, but we gotta follow the rules to get around the rules. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I guess my understanding of it is that the bids don't have, I guess, Janessa is gone, but essentially don't have standing as an individual entity to get other counsel. So is one scenario that you're maybe alluding to, or I shouldn't say you, this I guess is what I'm thinking about. If one of the bids made funding available in its budget, requesting that the city organization seek an additional legal opinion from, if there were some expert firm in bid law or municipal or whatever, to validate and identify potential additional avenues for, again,
Probably want to do something like a study on what are different tools, like there might be bids, there might be NIDS, there might be something else that doesn't require you to be connected to the city, and there might be, and Dave, you can chime in if you're kind of envisioning this, but I think it would be specifically like, how do we refute the city attorney's office? It would be, how do you guys, or how do we as a group come up with figure out the best organizational structure to help you achieve your goals to support the whole community? And that I think we could probably fund, you guys could fund it out of your budget, we can fund it out of our budget, but I don't know, David.
Yeah, like, one example is, talking to Jeff Frowley about Menominee, and it sounds like we're on our way with the procurement here. Their bid board over there just turns the money over to the Main Street Association, and there's no RFPs, there's no anything on that. So to come up with, to figure out ways on how can we do that, it's still unclear 100% on like the notes and the agendas and stuff. I think Billy's got a good plan going forward, just calling up like, hey, Ann, let's go over the agenda. What do you want on it? What do we want on it? But taking the notes, if that's a policy issue, to have that, like we did trash study out there to say, well, Appleton did it this way and Madison does it with their staff because there were errors or there was graph or, whatever on it. So I think working through those individual issues, but I think like Dave Strobel still does not accept that bids are part of the city. And I know other members, but they have like a court case where the bids hire an attorney to fight that the bids aren't part of the city on it. I think is
right.
But and my hope is that 6 months from now, everybody's like, you know what, we got through the operating plan, Billy and Aaron or whoever is helping in Rebecca's stead. You guys are really helping us out, and we're back to doing what we want to do with bids, and we won't even hopefully have to approach it like an attorney, but.
So we've changed, a bunch of things have changed. So Decky is independent, at least some of the bids are contracting with Decky. They seem like they're doing an awesome job using that flexibility and entrepreneurial positioning to do more and different things. And so I mean, if people can survive another 6 months, then we'll have more information to know, is it working, what needs to be fixed. But I personally feel really hopeful that this is going to make us stronger in the long run. And if it's not, at least we'll have the tools to figure out how we can further evolve. So that's my, I think it's on the right track, and I know there's been a lot of talk, like hard feelings and stuff like that, but I really think it's on the right track and it's gonna be good.
I generally agree with both of you in that a court case is not like, there's not standing to, left hand fighting the right hand or something. It's one entity. And I think taking a broader scope view of everything is also useful, but to the extent that some of this is about being able to satisfy concerns based on whatever they're based on. Getting some additional, maybe it is more on the lines of the municipalities association or other, some external validation that this path is reasonable at this moment. It seems if there is a third path there to help get something in folks' hands to say, here's an expert outside validator saying that this is more or less the scope of options that are available in general, because that no external source would be able to say, well, this is the city's position. Only the city can do that. So I don't know if no action is satisfactory to those that might otherwise prevent or not see fit to move forward with new operating plans. I don't have a sense, I guess, in other bids of where that stands, but I guess it feels like there may still be some fairly limited or shorter term study that could be valuable to help this progress in light of the constraints we've all discussed plenty over the last couple of weeks, years, what have you. I don't know. That's me attempting to synthesize it. I don't feel like I have a strong position one way or the other, or what Water Street would think, but
Yeah, there's, I'm looking at it right here. I mean, there's even the SB attorneys section. I believe on that enter your information.
Or they can maybe come to a future meeting and talk about how it's done in other places.
I'm not getting a lot of bid when I'm doing searches on it.
I have a curiosity about, we gotta roll. I do have a curiosity about, there must be case law or law making it clear that a police department or a library can't hire outside counsel. So where is the beginning of this conversation? Like, where's that? So I can start reading. Is it a state law that any department of any city cannot have its own counsel? Because I think part of the argument is that we're a city department and that's why it's obvious that we can't get our own counsel. But I'm just curious, where does this begin? Is this just something we've always known or is it real?
Or is it the fear that there would be a committee?
There has definitely been
In a
some
legal
super
fight.
bad city staff doing something very bad to a city department somewhere in the history of the United States. It's happening right now, I'm sure all over the country. So there must be times where a giant department of the city has decided to fight the city, right? And not just take what the city attorneys or the attorney's office is saying, like, there were tons of
Give
examples of it.
me an example of like, is it a fire commission or like some other like police and fire commission does have a right? But that might be like a city county
It's like,
cooperation.
it's like whatever it is, what's the name? I mean.
Well, and with that,
I understand they don't want to do it, but I want to know, like, where does it start to say that we, like, where's the law about it?
well, and I think it's,
It has to be somewhere.
as a non-lawyer, I think it's part of what they go to school for 20 years or 5 years, or longer than I'm willing to go to school for. The concept of what is an entity that has the ability to represent itself and standing to bring cases of a certain sort or complaints, allegations of a certain sort. And it's more a question of, is this one entity or many? And I think it's one is how we understand it. But I think that is the accretion of case law in the United States coming out of the British common law system as to who has those rights. So I don't think we'll find something that says that in Wisconsin state statute. And
In our city ordinances,
That's
since all city businesses.
Define the city.
a case that I just observed was that in the county, there was the drama about human services department, if you remember, and then the sheriff's department investigated the human services department, which was not what should have happened. It should have been an external entity investigating, because it would be like our police department coming, you know, like, it's like one department
Mhm.
enforcing another, which is a really, it basically almost brought the whole county to destruction. That's a little different, but you can see it, I just had a firsthand see that it was like a very, very,
And the other thing about reading law as a non-lawyer is that it's a lot harder to read what isn't in a given statute.
Mhm.
And that's so much, if you don't have the full umbrella picture of how it all fits together. So I think we referenced at some point that while the bid statute says certain things, what it doesn't say is, there is hereby created an entity that is its own thing that gets to do its own. So the absence of that combined with how they were actually created by legislative, that's my understanding at least, but
City.
And there can be case law
along
after
with
it that,
changing practices and people turning over it's not self-evident.
Legal, but it refers to it under the operating plan, and it does not refer to city legal, which is why you have this outside firm. It's a legal opinion have been complied with, and it doesn't say
Yeah,
from that municipality.
That, not being a lawyer, that may be like how it says legislative body,
That's
but not
why everybody else
city
says,
council. I just,
put eyes on it to make sure that it follows the state statute.
Part of me even wonders if, like, because, I have a lot of thoughts on this, like, okay, what position am I in? If I had permission from city council to get a legal opinion on the operating plan, at least then city council would have assurance that what I'm asking for in my operating plan is not illegal according to this city opinion. So maybe it's not like representation to an attorney, but at least the ability to hire an attorney to give an opinion. And part of me is like, I even tried to get an attorney to represent myself on how do I do this role without feeling so, I don't know,
uncertain.
unempowered. And the answer from the attorney was that I would need to request a waiver of conflict of interest from the city of Eau Claire for them to represent me. He goes, like, basically, I'm just like, oh, this is such a mess. All I want is, the ability to what I'm asking for is either legal or not legal without the kind of, the perspective of this is how it fits within our city, because city attorney could still advise council, this is why that plan would be in conflict with our policy, but, yes, it's
So
legal.
with
but
that-
it-
with that attorney saying you'd need a conflict of interest form, it sounds like he's saying it's not something he could do unless the city authorized
The
him
city
to do it.
attorney would have to say that you've represented some portion of the city of Eau Claire in the past. So, like that attorney can't then,
So that attorney will have a conflict with.
But then it's your,
things that are driving me crazy. How close are we to resolving them? I mean, is there, because the legal thing is one approach, but are we getting close on the issues that are really driving you crazy and making you feel unempowered? Like,
Well-
could we follow those?
even this consideration of composition of the board. I don't know, my board, said we like how our bylaws are, that all members should be from, own or occupy a business.
That's a council
But that's
decision.
Council, so
Yeah, it's not
if
staff.
they support that, then you're all set. And the paying for staffing, that's a council decision.
But the legal response memo to